and it is genuine, please exit from the door you came in, the main door there, turn right and go down and assemble on the paved area by the cathedral, please. Toilets outside to the left and the right, down the stairs. Welcome to everybody and welcome to those who are watching on YouTube. First thing, apologies for absence. We have some apologies. Richard is...
Yes, Chair, we have Richard Eddy, who is substituting for Councillor Udin, and we have Councillor Classic substituting for Councillor Gooch.
Thank you. Any other apologies? I don't think so. Declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest from members? No, thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. No one has suggested any amendments to those meetings, to those minutes. So do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Eddy, thank you. All happy to approve those? Approved, thank you. Alison. And action sheet, no outstanding actions. We have a number of appeals. I just wonder, does anyone have any question regarding the appeals report? I won't ask Jonathan to particularly summarise it because we've got a full agenda today. Richard.
It's not actually a question, Chairman, but I have on occasion been a bit critical when we've lost a fair number of appeals on delegated decisions. I'm pleased to see they swung back quite considerably. So obviously the officers who are delegating decisions are making more robust decisions.
And I'm sure officers are pleased to accept that as that commendation on their work. Thank you. We have nothing on the enforcement report. And so we move now to the first item on the agenda, which is the land at Broomhill, Brislington Meadows. And we have some questions, but none of the questioners, I believe, are here present. So their questions have been answered in the documents online for everyone's reading. And we have some statements. Please excuse me if I get anyone's surname wrong, but I think I'm on solid ground. Miss Janet Wren, you're the first one. We have a roving microphone up there, and you have 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you. Apologies if this goes on a bit longer, but I realise 2 of my statements have been amalgamated, and I've not actually got copies of the finalised version. I'll do my best.
You have 1 minute. Yeah, thank you.
Brislington Meadows is positioned adjacent to a 1960s built trading estate with roads that were built and designed for 1960s traffic, not the traffic of today with large HGVs. It is not a business park with purpose-built wide roads. The only road to the Meadows, Broomhill Road, is just about wide enough for a lorry, no passing places for the whole half mile of the road length. The development called Brislington Meadows comprises of 9.2 hectares of land, which is both meadowland and a brownfield site, but this brownfield site is overlooked and not mentioned. The brownfield land is on the edge of the site and is surrounded by houses. The site has been a police station and an area housing office and currently serves no useful purpose. It has been left derelict for many years and is a perfect location for housing, and locals will welcome it being used for housing. Broomhill needs the Meadows. It's our green lungs against the traffic pollution of the Broomhill Road, the trading estate and the Bath Road. It's our green space full of amazing ancient trees, shrubs and flowers, and has tons of wildlife and birds. It's our place to support our mental health and the simple pleasures of taking children for a walk in nature.
Time is nearly up.
Thank you. Develop the brownfield site for homes. It's a waste leaving it as it is. There would be homes for people, and the meadows remain as they are for future generations to enjoy as we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on my list is Danica Priest.
Brislington Meadows can still be saved. Keepmoat will tell you this is about affordable housing, but estate agent C.G. Hole said that the development will actually raise prices. They will tell you their biodiversity net gain is well over the minimum, but they haven't submitted an approved metric, so there's no enforceable mechanism in place to secure this. The planning director for Savills will claim this isn't revisiting the principle of development, but approval would preempt a condition that is explicitly required to be discharged first. If this was a done deal, these guys wouldn't bother showing up. They wouldn't waste their time and money if they weren't scared. That's why they won't mention that the site is being taken out of the local plan, which was the deciding factor for the original approval. Keepmoat will claim they reflected our views, but our only view is to save this precious nature site from their development. You are the decision makers. If you want to refuse this application, the NPPF says you can. Don't let them tell you your hands are tied. Don't let the fear of appeal scare you. Brislington Meadows deserves a fair fight.
Thank you. Mr. Ben Leather?
Chair, members of the committee, Keepmoat Homes recognises there are strong views about Brislington Meadows, both in the community and around this council. We have treated those views with respect throughout and have worked hard to listen, not just to defend a proposal, but to improve it. Our purpose has been to work with officers and local residents to shape the best possible neighbourhood that can be delivered on this site, for people who live nearby today and for future generations of Bristolians who need a home. That is why the scheme brings forward 260 homes with 30% affordable housing, 3/4 of which are for social rent, alongside a real mix of homes for Bristol's families. It retains significant green space, delivers a biodiversity net gain well above the minimum, and follows the parameters already agreed at the outline stage. We understand the responsibility you carry in making this decision. We simply ask that the scheme be judged on the merits of this reserved matters application, and you endorse your officer's recommendation for approval and enable Keepmoat to deliver the homes and other benefits for Bristol. Thank you.
Thank you. Charlotte Birchall?
Good afternoon, councillors. This application is for reserved matters, layout, appearance, scale and landscaping, following the outline consent already in place. It is not revisiting the principle of development. Since our submission, the scheme has been refined through officer and consultee engagement, including amendments to parking and cycle provision, gradients, materials and landscape detailing. The proposals remain within the approved parameters and comply with relevant planning policy. Officers are recommending approval, and no statutory consultees have raised objections. A small number of items are secured through the normal mechanisms alongside reserve matters. These include biodiversity net gain through the outline condition discharge route and public rights of way through the separate diversion order process. These are standard processes and do not prevent a decision today. Taken together, this provides a clear basis for approval of the reserve matters details before you, as per the recommendation of your planning officer. Thank you.
Katie Peters?
Thank you, members of the committee. Keepmoat Homes has listened carefully to local people and then reflected their views in this scheme. At 2 community drop-in sessions, people raised 3 consistent concerns: nature, accessibility, and the type of homes Bristol actually needs. First, on nature, the scheme is designed to leave a lasting improvement with a biodiversity net gain of 17%, well above the minimum required, backed by a clear mechanism to secure and monitor delivery. Our approach is supported by officers. Second, on accessibility, the site has a challenging topography, but the main routes have been designed to reduce gradients and make streets and paths easier to use, including for wheelchair users and people with pushchairs. Third, on housing, this is not an estate of anonymous flats. It provides a mix of homes, including family housing and 30% affordable provision, which is meaningful in Bristol's current housing need. These are aspects where Keepmoat have listened to local people and acted in the best interests of Bristol as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tim Rippington?
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, this planning decision isn't just about how to build 260 homes on Brislington Meadows. It's about whether the law on biodiversity net gain actually means anything at all, or whether it's just another load of hot air. Is BNG just another calculation for developers to make on paper, identifying a place or someone else to take on responsibility? Or does it actually mean that a development cannot go ahead unless you can prove that you can create a better environment elsewhere than the one that you are destroying? Because that is what biodiversity net gain should mean. In this case, you need to ask yourselves, can ancient and beautiful meadows be replaced by identifying a few surrounding fields of less ecological value and grazing some sheep on them? Can the impact of cutting down those trees and hedgerows and destroying countless wildlife habitats simply be offset without any real planning, or by simply handing the task over to the council and telling them to do it? I don't think so, and I suspect you don't really believe that either. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Ashdown, please.
Thank you, Chair. 12 years ago, the council made a terrible mistake. Along with 7 other sites of nature conservation interest, it allocated part of Brislington Meadows SNCI for development. To add insult to injury, planners then argued that these allocations removed each site's SNCI status. This was wrong then, and it is wrong today. After much lobbying by us, the council now accepts that the sites are indeed SNCIs. This is reflected in the latest proposal of the new local plan. Brislington Meadows is now therefore properly designated as an SNCI. Brislington Meadows should never have been allocated for development. Today you have a chance to put this historic wrong to right and refuse this application. Should you decide otherwise, then the council, Bristol, will suffer a huge environmental loss. Should you decide to do the right thing, and I sincerely hope you do, the standing orders will oblige you to send the matter back to planners so that they can formulate reasons for refusal. Can I just finish, please, Chair?
You can if you're quick.
I'll be as quick as I must be. We have drafted 10 reasons which are before you legitimately to refuse this application. They are published in the statements. We urge you to adopt these matters before you make your final decision. Please do not allow officers, as they did in another...
Thank you, Mark. You have used up all your time. Thank you very much. Councillor Katja-Hornchen.
Thank you, Chair. I'm normally a councillor that encourages house building. We need more homes, desperately need affordable council housing. But Brislington Meadows is different. Today you will hear from a lot of people in my ward and local community, over 500 objections and counting. Not only are these fields very biodiverse spaces, one of the country's most lacking in biodiversity, but they've been well looked after and loved by people of the local green space and a local community. I'm not proud to say that this community has really been let down by politicians of all colours. But today we are here to look at reserved matters application, and it fails. The details of securing biodiversity net gain, as we are asked to trust to be secured, to build conventional back-to-back housing with small fenced gardens, destroying over half the hedgerows, vital food for many species. And the publication of reports, I believe, only came in 2 days ago. Roads that are far too steep for our own highways to incorporate, traffic management plan that is out of date, and there is enough that does not meet the criteria for the reserved matters application. Councillors, I urge you to really deeply look into this. Thank you.
Thank you. Kay O'Shea, or is it Kai? Sorry. No. Oh, is Hilary Ryden here? We just got a little bit of clarity as to whether Hilary is coming. No. Okay, you're all right, Hilary. In that case, we move on to Councillor Rob Breyer. No, not present. Next one on my list is Julie Thompson. Lucy Bell Reeves.
Thank you. Just to say I second everything that the Save Brislington Meadows group and the councillors and the Bristol Tree Forum have said. Brislington Meadows is an incredible space. I walk there every single day and it provides vital access to nature in a really built up area of South Bristol. It sits between an industrial estate, housing and schools, and it's a really unique connection between the city and the countryside. I really hope that you've all read the multiple objections that our community has pulled together and you get a sense of the preciousness of this space, not just for nature, but for the mental and physical health benefits it brings to our community. The benefits are dismissed by letters, documents, and statements from the developers. They tell you their benefits outweigh the biodiversity, the sacredness of this space. And they suggest that simply planting new trees, offsetting diversity to unspecified and unsecured sites can all just be worked out once you approve it. But we ask you to really look at the detail where it matters on this and look at what Bristol will lose if these meadows are destroyed, not simply look at the benefits of a few number of houses that will harm this community, not enhance it.
Thank you very much. According to my list, that is everybody who wishes to speak on this. What's your name, please? Sorry?
She said she wasn't attending in your email, but obviously she's here.
Okay. In your email, you said you weren't attending, but I will allow you to speak.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that very much. Right. These protected SNCI meadows have stood as a wild space forever, with rare expansive views that open hearts and minds to calm and freedom needed in our ever-enclosing modern world that brings with it the well-documented mental health issues. Access to natural spaces eases this serious health condition. Keepmoat want to buy their way out of their 30-year 10% BNG responsibilities to give to BCC. Are you prepared to fund such an undertaking? They have failed to update 2 vital reports more than 3 years out of date, traffic and ecology. Their woeful inaccurate local traffic report is undertaken during COVID shutdown. Doesn't mention the chaos of Bath Road, where also 1,000 homes are underway with more planned. An updated ecology report requested by the police wildlife team has not appeared, and the false claim that protected badgers do not exist, we have proved wrong. Dangerously, they have not explained how their drainage plans will effectively prevent flooding once this vital soakaway is destroyed. Locals and Bristol City Council are being disrespected as these failings show nothing but contempt for our city. How can you decide on this destruction when briefs have not been met? It is absolutely wrong.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. I'm assuming that is everybody. My pleasure, thanks. So what we are looking at is a reserved matters application. The principle of development on this site has been established by the inspector, so that's not up for discussion. What we're looking at are reserved matters, specifically layout, appearance, scale, and landscaping. So I'm going to hand over now to our officer, Conrad, for a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so what we have today is an application for reserve matters, land at Broomhill, Brislington Meadows. The application is for the reserve matters, which consist of layout, appearance, scale, and landscaping. The proposal is for 260 residential dwellings with associated infrastructure following the outline. So the reason for the committee referral primarily is the ward member call-in. Councillor Hornchen raised issues with ecology and B&G, also issues with traffic. There's also been a ward member objection from Councillor Rippington, and we've had an MP objection relating issues of B&G and traffic. To date, in total, there's been 598 objections received, with 5 letters of support. Main concerns raised include design, poor design amenity, impact on privacy of nearby residents. There's been highway issues raised related to traffic, work access, issues with walking and cycling routes connecting to the existing, diversions of public rights of way, issues with cycle parking, and concerns that the roads do not meet the LTM 1 in 20 standards. Concerns have been raised of informal parking. Objections have been raised regarding ecology and B&G, stating that there's no clear B&G mitigation plan and how mitigation will be achieved. There's issues raised with the ecological impact assessment and concerns of impact to wildlife on the site. Objections have been raised regarding trees, flood risk, concerns of water runoff. Other issues have been raised regarding infrastructure, so concerns of impact on GPs and schools. So let's give a bit of background on the outline permission. The appeal was made on the grounds of non-determination because the council did not reach a decision on the application within the statutory time limit. The planning inspectorate considered the council's reasons for refusal as part of the appeal process, which were considered ahead of the inquiry of the planning appeal, and it's held that they were not grounds for refusing planning permission. The role of the reserve matters application is to demonstrate compliance with the outline permission. For this application, this means demonstrating that that is done in accordance with the approved parameter plans and the approved design code. It is not the role of the reserve matters application to address the reasons for refusal that were given at the appeal. So the principle has been established by the outline consent, which sets the parameters for the number of dwellings and other floor space. There's also a series of conditions which the reserve matters application must be carried out in accordance with. The following parameter plans and design documents were approved under the outline plan permission, which govern the detailed design. So we had the access movement and parameter plan, heights parameter plan, landscape parameter plan, land use parameter plan, design code. In addition, detailed plans showing the access school route and school crossing were approved under the outline permission. The quantum of 260 dwellings as approved outline are proposed in the reserve matters. So the considerations for the reserve matters application seeks the approval of 4 matters: appearance, landscaping, layout and scale. These are detailed in condition 1 of the outline consent. So we have the site location plan. To the west we have School Road. To the east we have the Broomhill Road industrial estate. Trying to get my highlighter working, but no worries. And then we have the Broomhill Road and Belroy Avenue to the north of the site. To the south of the site we have the Brislington Meadows and chalet garden allotments, and also within the western corner of the site you have the park allotments. Here's the existing access points to the site. So we've got several pedestrian points. We've got one from the School Road, one from the south from Brislington Meadows itself, and we've got 2 points of access to the east from the Broomhill Road industrial estate, and we have 2 points from the north. You can see some pictures there of the existing site pedestrian accesses. And we've got the proposed site layout. We have one road proposed from Broomhill Road. This will be facilitated through the former site of the police station. Got the proposed landscape plan. You can see to the south, you've got in both corners proposed attenuation ponds with open space and landscaping around those. We've retained quite a lot of the trees around the boundary of the site and some of the existing hedgerows. We have an area of open space in the north-west corner. We've got the proposed massing, so we've got 4-storey elements, predominantly fronting the Broomhill Road industrial estate. We have some 3-storey townhouses on the southern periphery near the attenuation pond, and most of the rest of the site consists of 2-storey family housing. It's a proposed illustrative view, as you can see from looking from the east, from the Broomhill Road industrial estate. Got some proposed sections of the site there. So you can see some of the 3-storey townhouses and also the 4-storey apartments to the east of the site. And then we can see some of the 2-storey family units. Some illustrative streetscapes. You can see the entrance from the Broomhill Road with some housing on the right-hand side, proposal of tree-lined highway entering the site. You can see the Brislington Green proposed open space. And we have some illustrative streetscapes. And this is from the south, southern edge on the western side. 3-storey townhouses overlooking the slope. So we've got a minor update. There's an amended B&G metric was submitted following updating. That was on the 30th of the 3rd as part of the discharge of condition 25, which is in parallel to this application. So it's not, the B&G doesn't relate directly to the reserve matters, but as suggested in the outline, it's been submitted as a separate condition. And the updated metric is the latest one, 1.04. The calculations and results of the assessment reflect what's been already submitted due to it being a minor update. So just to conclude, in accordance with the outline permission, the proposed development would contribute to the delivery of new affordable homes on a previously allocated site within the Bristol local plan. The Reserve Matters application demonstrates that the proposed development is of an appropriate type of mix for the area. We understand that the site is challenging in terms of topography. However, officers have worked with the applicant to achieve a good balance of design while addressing steep gradients to improve highway accessibility. The design and appearance of the dwellings is acceptable and considered to comply with the design code and approved outline permission. The proposed development is considered acceptable in terms of highway and transport. The proposed development demonstrates potential for sufficient reductions in CO2 emissions, considers sustainable design and construction, nature conservation, and green infrastructure. The recommendation then would be to delegate officer to approve the reserve matter subject to conditions to be delegated to officer. So approval subject to officer delegation of conditions. There is also a discharge condition for the B&G that would be required to be discharged prior to being able to issue this decision. That would be subject to a legal agreement. The legal agreement would cover on-site provision of B&G and monitoring, and potentially a financial contribution for some additional off-site biodiversity net gain uplift. There's also just be mindful that there's a public path order diversion that would be required to facilitate the proposal. That would need to be done prior to completion of the development, but that would be a separate matter. So the conditions subject to officer delegation would be highways, design, landscaping and ecology. There have been a few minor amendments suggested that could be done at the same time, small design changes to reduce the height of a retaining wall on a few plots, and a small reduction in parking provision just to meet TDM parking standards, but that would be delegated to officer level. So I'll hand you back to the chair. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Conrad. It's time now for officer questions. So Councillor Durston, followed by Councillor Eddy.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation. Can you just, going back to slide 20, where you talked about the minor update on the BNG metric? It's not quite clear to me what you were telling us there. Could you just...
Yeah, so there's a condition for the discharge of the BNG strategy that's not part of this reserve matters application, but it's been submitted alongside it, so it's currently in. And then there's a B&G metric calculation that is required as part of the B&G strategy. So that was done on the previous version of the metric. So the latest version is 1.04. So they've updated that to reflect the current metric that we're using. However, the results that have come back are the same as it was calculated under the previous metric. I mean, it's not really something that's for discussion on this application, but I just wanted to bring it to members' attention.
Thanks. So just to be clear, the BNG is totally outside this current application, but it's just up there for information. Councillor Eddy.
I'm very mindful of the Chairman's helpful reminder. We're dealing with a reserve matters application, not an outline or full application. I'm 90% sure of the answers to these two questions, but I'm posing them to Conrad for complete certainty and for transparency. Firstly, am I correct that our housing delivery team are completely happy with the applicant's mix of housing types? Very often I know we have concerns that way.
Issue raised with the mixture of housing. The percentage has been agreed at the outline stage, but this reflects what was suggested at the outline, and we've had no objections raised, so it's considered to be sort of policy compliant.
Thank you, Conrad. My second question was, as you acknowledge, the topography of Meadows is challenging. So are we certain that all the applicants' proposals for the design will actually accommodate, for example, disability scooters and parents' buggers?
Can I hand you over to Luke from TDM to reflect on that question?
So in terms of the gradients of the roads and the internal layout, so a lot of the guidance makes reference to 1 in 20 being that standard, and it was within the agreed design code outline application that the roads need to meet 1 in 20. The roads do meet 1 in 20, however, our adoption standards are a level above, essentially, so the distances need to be less of the 1 in 20, but yeah.
Thank you. Next person on my list is Councillor Poultney.
Thank you. Sorry, first question was a quick one, but just looking at the conditions, appreciating what the officer said about the BNG issue, the condition as written within the inspector's report was prior to or concurrent with the submission of the first reserve matters submission, which would be this one, right? A biodiversity net gain strategy shall have been submitted to and approved in writing by the LPA. Has that happened then? Has that been approved in writing already?
So we've submitted the application. It's currently in, which reflects what is set out at the outline. And we cannot issue this decision until that's been discharged.
Apologies, the way the condition's worded, it seems to suggest that before the reserve matters can be dealt with, the local authority shall have to have approved that biodiversity net gain strategy.
Yeah, so just to assist the committee on this point, in terms of the inspector's decision on the outline application, so it's condition 25, which is being referred to, and that does indeed require either prior to or concurrent with the submission of the first reserve matters for a biodiversity net gain strategy to be submitted and approved in writing by the local authority. As the officer set out, we have received details pursuant to that condition. which we have been assessing and feel we have a way forward on that. But as that will need to be subject to a legal agreement, the resolution of that is still to happen, and it will follow that we won't issue the reserve matters until that occurs.
Okay, I have next is Lisa, other Lisa, Councillor Stone.
Yeah, well, I'll pick up on from where Councillor Portney signed off. I was a bit confused with that information on the report, because it felt to me that reserve matters for the mitigation for the biological net gain had to be already in and approved by the council before or alongside. So I was assuming I'd be reading that today. So where is that report, and why can I not read it?
Well, for one thing, we're not considering it today. So it has to be done.
Yeah, but that's not what it says in the report. That's not what it says in the report. The report says that mitigation report was in to the council, to the council, and that had to be. I mean, I should get up the report, but it clearly says in the report on page 15 that those matters have to be approved by the council either today or simultaneously. Therefore, I assumed I was looking for the report, trying to read it, and it's not there to read. So I think we should defer the whole thing, to be honest with you, until that's clarified.
Our decision would be conditional upon that being approved. However, we are not considering that. Officers are considering that. It is delegated in our constitution. So we don't need to see a copy of it, because our decision is on other matters and would be subject to that being signed off by officers. But it's not
Well,
for
I'd
us
like to have that brought back to committee. I propose that we bring back that mitigation back to committee so we can decide on that and not delegate it to officers. I propose that. Does anybody want to second?
I don't believe our constitution allows for that, actually. But and anyway, you can't call for a motion at the moment. So we will. Do you wish to speak?
I think really just to say that that issue is covered by a separate condition, which is a separate submission. Here we're considering the reserve matters application, and there's a very set and defined set of issues which would be to be considered through that application. And the case officer has set those out, so the committee really needs to confine itself to the consideration of those matters on this reserve matters application. In terms of the recommendation, is to seek delegated authority for the approval of the reserve matters, but that would be subject to the resolution of the BNG, which is covered under condition 25.
Okay, Councillor Poultney. Sorry, Fabian was next.
Yeah, I mean, obviously on the bionet gain, I think we need some absolute clarity on that, because if it should have been agreed before the reserve matters comes to us, it should have been agreed, and then we should have had it in front of us as that's agreed, and then we can move on to...
We don't need. We're not considering biodiversity net gain at all. We're not allowed to. Because it is delegated to officers, so it is not. I'm afraid it is. That's the truth. Councillor Poultney.
I did have some other questions.
Carry on then, Fabian.
Okay, I'm concerned about the fact that we're not planning to adopt most of these roads because of the 1 in 20 rule. So my concern is that potential residents could be lumbered with, large maintenance fees. If it's privately owned roads, they're going to be lumbered with maintenance charges to keep them updated rather than having it covered by the council tax. Could the site be redesigned in order to ensure that the roads can all be adopted?
In terms of the design, there was a sort of balanced strike-off between benefits on design and benefits for accessibility. Obviously, given the gradients, there was a design code set out to try and achieve the 1 in 20 where possible, and I think that's been achieved. But in some cases, it would involve excavation, which would mean raising foundation levels, creating retaining walls, which would create sort of a design that wouldn't be attractive. But I could pass you on to highways to kind of further the response to that.
So I think, as Conrad just mentioned, in terms of adoption of the highways, our highway standards are set by the golden motion of making Bristol the most accessible city within the country. So that means our highways adoption standards are really strong. So in this instance, all the roads do meet the 1 in 20 standard that guidance sets out. However, because our highways adoption standards are that much greater, they do not meet that standard, and therefore, as highways, we're unable to adopt. So we are adopting the main spine roads. However, the cul-de-sacs as highways we will not be adopting. As Conrad had mentioned, there was a balance to be struck between significant retaining walls that impacted the design of the housing and the green area to the south, and obviously the cost implications of having such great retaining walls over and above what's proposed at present.
So how do we protect residents, potential residents, from charges? I mean, some of these are going to be affordable? Are they affordable rent? Are some of these going to be in private ownership? In which case, are they going to be freehold and free or leasehold? How's this going to work? Because I'm just worried about you hear stories about people in new develops in their leasehold, and they're getting, so many high charges dumped on them on top of the mortgage and everything else, that the properties are basically worthless and unsellable.
I think in terms of the private estate roads, they will be privately maintained. So there'll be a management plan that will need to be submitted. However, it's under a private arrangement. So as a highways authority, in terms of costs, we can't secure that, I'm afraid. You got it.
Just to add, though, there is a potential with the management condition that we could ensure that those costs are minimised as much as possible. So.
Councillor Pulteney.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to confirm again, and apologies for coming back to this. In respect to the BNG, the reason I think possibly you've been advised that it's not for consideration today was because there's an assumption, certainly within the inspector's decision, that has already been dealt with. But what we seem to be hearing is that we haven't seen that. One of the things it mentions both in the report, where it quotes directly for the inspector's decision, is that it shall be informed by a contemporary assessment. And I can't see an assessment here that's been done since that inspector's report was written. Is that the case, or am I missing something? Has there been an updated assessment since then?
There's a current assessment in. It's a separate application. It's a condition discharge as set out in the outline. So that's condition 25.
But is it not the case then, given the way that the inspector wrote the decision, that we're kind of trying to second guess, because we know that this is a difficult site. The inspector seemed keen to make sure that the BNG issue was dealt with before we assessed all of the other reserve matters, so that you didn't end up in this situation where you were trading off the flood risk with nature, with all of the other factors, with the transport issues that we're considering.
If you'll excuse me, Guy, I'll hand over to Simone.
Thanks.
So the condition application, as Conrad has already explained, is in. We've got the updated metric, which shows that which has basically, how can I say, endorsed or shown that what was previously submitted is still reliable. As such, we have no reasons to believe at the moment that the BNG cannot be positively resolved as had so far been assumed. The decision you're making today is a minded to decision. Therefore, the actual decision won't be made until the decision is issued. So should the ongoing in parallel assessment, which was, as you know, was also envisaged as possible, should that indicate that actually there is an issue with B&G, we can then at that point flag it again and bring it back to committee. But certainly at this point, I think we've got enough reason to believe that the condition discharge is happening as intended, and will definitely happen before the consent on this application will be issued, and therefore is compliant with what had been set out in the outline consent.
But apologies, just to follow up, the condition wasn't prior to or concurrent with the determination, prior to or concurrent with the submission of the first reserve matters submission. A B&G strategy shall have been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. That has not happened, has it? To be absolutely clear, that has not happened. It was not submitted prior, and it has not been agreed in writing. And we are at the first reserved matters determination, let alone the first reserved matters submission.
Yeah, in terms of the sequencing of that, you are correct in that condition. We would need to be satisfied that we were in a position to approve those details before we could actually issue the decision on the reserve matters. So, yeah, like the Chief Planner said today, really, in terms of the decision on this reserve matters application, it's a minded to. So we're seeking the delegation to ultimately go on and issue that approval once the details pursuant to that condition 25 are acceptable.
Just to add, so the key factor is the decision point, not the submission point.
No, apologies. In the report and in the inspector's decision, it says prior to the submission, not the decision.
Chair, I don't see how we can...
Fabian, I haven't invited you to speak. Could you just allow Simone to... Yeah, but I didn't call you. Could you just allow Simone to finish, please?
I had finished. We will look into this further, but we are relatively confident in what we've said.
Okay, so your feeling would be that the point of consent in legal terms is when officers sign off the application finally. We are making an in-principle decision here, but ultimately the applicant cannot go away now and build that. The consent is when officers have signed off everything, so it's a sequencing would taking into account the point of decision as being when officers consent. I think that's Simone's case, but she's going to look at it and come back to us. Can we move on to other things, and then Simone will come back to us on that one. Fabian, you're the next, and then Councillor Stone.
Yeah, if that is the B&G is supposed to be agreed before this is issued, I just think, given the sensitivity of the site and all of that, I appreciate that the principle of housing on the site is agreed.
A question to officers?
The question is, surely, how can we... I just think we're putting the cart before the horse, and in the interest of transparency, I just think it would be better if we...
That's not a question.
That's
not a question.
All right.
Simone is looking into the sequencing and will come back to us. Councillor Stone?
Okay, yeah, I'd like to move on to discuss the flooding risks. Now, I know that topography is challenging, as you know. So the area is a risk of flooding, and I'd like to just know a little bit more about the attenuation ponds, how they're going to work, whether or not you're going to use nature recovery, because in the report it stipulates quite clearly that they want to use landscape-led developments. Can you please just kind of like fill me in on that landscape-led development and how we're going to use sustainable urban drainage and how and whether or not we're using nature recovery as part of that sustainable urban drainage. Thanks.
So there's two flood attenuation ponds proposed both on the southern corners, one in the east and one in the west, kind of makes sense given the topography that slopes down into these areas. So those will be engineered into the current site. So there'll be excavation, there'll be a geomembrane incorporated into those attenuation ponds with maintenance potential there. I think there'll be like a minimum amount of level of water that will be kept there. I think something like 0.6 meters at the low level, something like 1.6 at the high level. They will allow for runoff from the site, from the built features, from the roads, to create a SUDS feature to prevent flooding on site. So there'll be some of the water will run into drains, or a lot of the water will run into drains and be diverted into these two attenuation ponds, and then there will be used as a feature within the landscaped areas. So the southern portion of the site will be there'll be additional landscaping undertaken around these areas and creating a sort of focal point for public open space.
Okay, Councillor Stone. Yes.
Yeah. I think that's fine. Yeah, I just wanted to know whether or not. So you said engineering. So is there going to be any real type of nature regeneration? As in, I know there's nature. Are you using nature? Are you using, for example, a natural kind of like filtration systems?
The filtration will be engineered through a membrane, and a lot of the filtration will run into the attenuation ponds through water runoff from the new development. But there will be natural runoff given topography. They'll obviously be excavated with steep slopes either side, so that will allow for where the water runs off anyway. And then obviously with the landscaping and meadow around it, it will help to attract nature around these water features.
Councillor Durston.
Thank you. I wonder if you could address people's concerns around the traffic impact assessment, and I'm recognising that we're told in the papers that this isn't a material consideration on this application because it was addressed in the outline, but it's clearly a concern to a lot of people, as we've seen from a lot of the statements. Can you explain why another traffic impact assessment hasn't been done, given that the previous one was done, I think, in 2022?
Yeah, so there was a traffic study undertaken for the outline, which obviously we assessed the principle of development for 260 dwellings and what would be the associated traffic with that. So that's already being considered. Obviously, at this stage now, we would just consider the movements within the site. I can pass over to Highways for some more clarification on that.
I'd agree with what you just said, Comrade, in regards to what we could consider at this stage, given the traffic impact on the wider network was considered outline, and the planning inspector considered that to be acceptable with mitigation.
Okay, Councillor Poultney.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I think this is my last one before I think we're pretty close to going to the debate anyway.
I'll decide that. I'm Chair, but anyway, carry on.
Of course, sorry. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to check again, and apologies, but I'm looking at, I thought I'd look up the other application, the submitted concurrently but not yet signed off. Am I looking at the right thing? The document from Ethos is the new biodiversity net gain assessment. Is that the right one? Yeah, the new one that's been submitted.
Yeah, there is, I was just going to bring to members' attention, there's a letter actually attached to the amendment sheet, which is dated the 27th of March, which includes a summary of a few issues, one of which is in relation to BNG. And that just actually may be of assistance in terms of explaining where we are, but that refers to the Ethos environmental planning strategy that is dated February 2026, which has been submitted to us, but that's in relation to that conditions application.
That's great. That's really helpful. What I was wondering, in terms of meeting the BNG, that's for the applicant to demonstrate that they can do that, right? That's not, the local authority is not under any obligation to help them. It's for the applicant to deliver biodiversity net gain as part of their application, yes? That's my understanding of it. So I'm looking at the, apologies, but for the benefit of the rest of the committee, the executive summary of the ethos that's been submitted, which reads quite clearly, the majority of area habitats will require removal as part of the proposed development. The development proposals result in a 40.12% loss for habitats, 22.12 gain for hedgerows, but because of this, the project does not meet the trading rules within the metric, nor does it secure the required 10% gain in biodiversity for the area and linear units. Now, therefore, a suitable offsetting site has been identified within the adjacent Brislington Meadows SNCI. That's council-owned land, isn't it? Yes. So, in other words, the part of the application that's supposed to be signed off before we look at these other reserve matters, that thing that was supposed to have been submitted and agreed in writing prior to this meeting hasn't been, and is completely reliant on the council's support to deliver that off-site mitigation. Otherwise, this is not policy compliant.
Not prior to this meeting, prior to the decision in the view of officers.
Apologies, no, Chair. This is a really key point because all of the officers have said it's not prior to the decision, it's prior to the submission, which is what it says in both the inspector's report and the officer's report.
I will refer to Simone, who's been busy studying this matter now. Thank you.
Indeed, I have indeed sought some further advice as well, and actually officers had also checked this with legal specifically, who had confirmed that it's very clear because in the inspector's decision letter it specifically says prior to or concurrent with the submission. So as long as the condition application is submitted in alongside the reserved matters application, that is all what the applicants had to do in order to satisfy this requirement. What we then have to make sure is that we don't issue the decision on the reserved matters ahead of the decision on the condition. As part of the BNG conversations, the applicants are absolutely in their right to also utilize off-site BNG credit utilization. They've chosen to come to us in that context. There have been meetings about facilitating that. This is what Jonathan referred to earlier around the Section 106. We'll need to make sure that all of this is absolutely secured so we can 100% rely on that happening. And therefore that is completely permissible. And therefore, you know, both the applicant and ourselves are complying with what the inspector had set out, both in terms of timing when we're considering it now, and following the instructions.
Thank you. That seemed perfectly clear to me. Councillor Stone.
It's not really that clear, to be honest with you. I mean, what I'm struggling is that it states quite clearly there's an ecological mitigation method statement that has to be submitted. And all I want, for me to actually really decide on this application, I really want to see the mitigation of the ecological, of the BNG. Otherwise, I can't make a reasonable, knowledgeable decision.
What,
and this is a big issue. I'd like to be able to read the ecological, or can you provide me with some information on the ecological mitigation method statement here, quickly, right here, right now? What's in it? Tell me about it.
Councillor Stone, we are not considering that today. You might like to consider it, but it's not here in our decision to be made according to our very own constitution and the decision of the inspector. We cannot base our decision on something that is outside of what is in front of us. Councillor Stone.
Okay, I'd like another question. I'd like to ask another question, and that's about the 1987 Disability Act. So going back to the incline or the 1 in 20 topography of the area, are we fulfilling all the I know there are a couple. I think there's about 3 M3s and M4 homes that are being built for obviously for disabilities. However, in the design application, there's allocation of disability access homes. But I just want to make sure that we are fulfilling our obligation for lifelong living standards and disability and the disability building regulations 1987. Because of the topography of the land, I would want to make sure that if you're in a wheelchair, you're not going to end up wheeling down a road and end up in an attenuation pond out of control.
So in respect to the roads where the M3 and M4 units are located, that is located along one of the spine roads that highways are adopting, so it does meet that standard. Where the parking courts are, which again are adjacent to the M3, M4 units, we wouldn't adopt anyway, regardless of incline, because they're parking courts, and as highways we don't want to maintain them at public expense. So
well, see, all I'm suggesting is that 6 out of the 11 highways in the design are not adopted by us, by Bristol City Council. They're not adopted by the TND.
Many highways around the city are not adopted by the council.
Yeah, I know, but this is a new application, and all I'm suggesting is that I want to make sure that when we are not adopting those roads, that they fulfil the 1987 Disability Act building regs, to make sure that people in wheels and walking frames can easily access them without being unsafe. That's what I'm asking.
Simone is going to respond.
Just to add to what Luke has already explained, so it does fulfil the legal requirements. Where it doesn't, it's the length over which the 1 in 20, which is a much higher than legal standard that the council has adopted. That's where it's not possible due to the topography. However, what the applicant is doing in these situations where you've got these longer distances of 1 in 20 is to provide sort of respite places so that you don't have to do it in one go. And that is considered to be the best compromise in a situation where you've got, steep topography, where
not if you're going downhill. If you're going downhill and you lose control of your wheel, it becomes really difficult.
Well, it's still useful, isn't it?
Well, so you're deciding an unsafe topography in a wheelchair, or people using wheels, going downhill, lose control, and you're allowing that to happen as part of our, because we have building regs to stop that from happening?
Jane is going to respond.
Yeah, to put it into context, 1 in 20 is the maximum standard for a ramp, a wheelchair accessible ramp. So it all meets wheelchair accessible standards. Our standard for highways is well above this, because it's to do more with cycling. The standards are achieved by this 1 in 20, which is a ramp. And to put that into context, the ramp outside is 1 in 20, Park Street is 1 in 12, and things negotiate. Admittedly, wheelchairs don't easily negotiate Park Street, we all know that, but a ramp is completely accessible for a wheelchair. And the wheelchair units are accessible from the highway which we are adopting. So that will be met.
Excuse me. Thank you. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, we'll move now to the discussion. Councillor Eddy, you're first.
Thank you, Chairman. 4.5 years ago, in September 2021, I rose in this very chamber and proposed my then so-called Green Spaces motion. This proposed we actually prioritise development on brownfield sites rather than on green spaces. It specifically mentioned 3 sites: land adjacent to Yew Tree Farm, the Weston Slopes and Meadows. And that was subsequently, I accepted a helpful stripping amendment from the Green Group, and every party here, every councillor backed the motion. That's a matter of fact. I'm pleased that we saved the land around Yew Tree Farm, the Western Slopes, where we turned down this committee or its predecessor turned down a planning application. But we're now here on Brislington Meadows. My commitment, I believe Meadows is a green lung Bristol should be proud of. I wish we weren't here. Sadly, we are here. And there are two facts which hang heavily with me in coming to a decision. The first is the original decision of the last administration. Whether I agree with it or not, I didn't actually, to sell the land Brislington Meadows for £50 million for housing to Homes England. Now, subsequently, it changed its mind. We won't go into why. But to me, it seems politically right, legally right, and morally right, if that was the case, for Bristol City Council to go back to Homes England and say, right, we don't want to use this land for this purpose, so here's your £50 million back, plus an uplift for inflation. The administration chose not to do so. We now move on to the appeal decision. And remember, it went to the predecessor of this committee for the grounds to actually oppose development, and that was thrown out by the Planning Inspectorate. So we are here dealing with the reserve matters as you properly allude to, Chairman. So realistically, it has legally been granted for that change of use, whether we like it or not, and I don't, but there we are. Therefore, were this committee minded to throw it out and refuse officer advice, in my view, the applicant will appeal to the Planning Inspectorate and it will look at the previous decision, look at the reserve matters and reverse it, approve the overturning of the refusal, grant it, probably would make substantial costs against us. Now, on Monday in this very chamber, we heard of the significant hard progress planning services that's made over the last 2.5 years. And we also heard the administration, Green and Lib Dem, had put in £300,000 extra in February to actually aid the reform, the improvement. Now, if we're hammered, say for double that amount, where are we then? And I think one has to seriously consider that. It's easy to grandstand, to be honest, but one has to look at the cost, the implication, and what it says to the sector, who we had said, yes, you can build here, and we actually go back on our word. And I don't actually agree that decision was right of the previous administration, but we are where we are. And that's where this committee needs to come to a decision. I looked at the reserve matters. They seem a good, well-designed scheme based upon the parent consent, and I'll be backing it for that reason, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Pulteney.
Thank you, Chair. I disagree with my colleague, I'm afraid to say. So 4 of us went out this morning to have a look around the site. I'm sorry we were the only ones that could make it. I appreciate some members were at a funeral for a friend. Firstly, and I'm becoming concerned about the number of times I'm the one who has to say this rather than officers, that the matter of costs is not something this committee can bear in mind. The risk of appeal is not something this committee can bear in mind. It is not a material consideration to what's in front of us. We should not be considering it.
It's not a material...
Apologies, Chair.
No, apologies, but you've just said something. We are not saying that it is a matter of cost. What concerns us is we are making incorrect decisions. That is something we should be concerned about, not the money.
Apologies. Then someone would have given reasons why we were making an incorrect decision. They wouldn't continuously raise the prospect of costs, the risk of costs. This is not something we are allowed to take into account. It is not a material consideration to this committee, and it is raised routinely at this committee, and we need to do something about it.
Yes, but it hasn't.
However,
it hasn't been raised today.
It has. It has been raised.
Richard took his, as a politician, to raise it. Officers have not raised that with you. So Richard did, but officers have not. Carry on.
Thank you, Chair. We have in front of us a statement from the inspector, repeated in the officer's report, in respect of this submission. Submission that must be submitted prior or concurrently and agreed in writing before the submission of any additional reserve matters. Now, the inspector would have been completely within their rights to say, shall be contingent upon, shall also submit. But he didn't. He said prior to. And we know why inspectors do this. We know why this is so
Prior
important.
to
Apologies, Chair, third interruption.
Yes,
please.
because you are stating something's incorrect. It's prior to or concurrently with. So your statement was incorrect. That is why I've interrupted you.
Don't need to quote it again, Chair. Signed off and agreed in writing by this authority prior to. This is critical because we know why inspectors do this. They do it so that we don't end up in a situation where we agreed a load of stuff today and that then ties our hands when the BNG assessment does come back and lo and behold, it can't deliver. That's why it's done like that. Because very often with these applications, you're trading off various factors. And I don't doubt that with almost any application, you can put in mitigation for each of the individual elements. You can mitigate for the flood risk. You can mitigate for the loss of the public right-of-way. You can provide the social housing. You can provide the planning obligations. You can do all of these things. But at the end of the day, it all has to happen in the same space and the same site at the same time. And we have so many compromises in this already that we have places we're expecting the public to live, to walk to, that are not of a sufficient standard for us to adopt as a local authority already. But at the end of the day, we can't really apply our minds to any of this because all of this is supposed to be contingent on an agreed BNG assessment based on a contemporary report that this committee has not seen, that has not been signed off by this council, and from what I've seen is entirely contingent from the developer's point of view on a third party that is not this committee agreeing to let them do it. So I'm suggesting right now that if the initial proposal, which we're required by the protocol to make, to do the officer's recommendation, if that falls, then I urgently think we need to propose something different to make sure that this is done properly, that we do know that the BNG is squared away before we start considering any of the other factors. Because otherwise we're tying ourselves in an ever tighter knot, not knowing if the scheme actually as a whole stacks up. I don't think it does. I think the developers knew it at the time. I think the public knew it at the time and raised it at the time. Councillors knew it at the time. Councillors see it now, the MP sees it now, the public sees it now, and apparently around 800 people online see it now. This committee needs to see it as well.
Thank you. It's not my, as chair, it's my job to help to guide you towards a secure decision. I would suggest that the monitoring officer is probably not going to allow us to bring to committee the BNG assessment because I do not think that constitutionally it's part of our scheme of delegation to do that at this point. But you may read it. You may read it online. As I say, my role as chair is just to help this committee to reach a secure decision, something which on this particular application did not happen last time, which is why it was put into the hands of the inspector and the decision was made with people outside of or beyond this council. That's a shame for the people of Bristol, which is why I like and I consider it an important part of my role to guide this committee to produce legal and secure decisions for the benefit of the residents of Brislington and the city. Okay. Anybody else like to comment before we move to a vote? Yeah. Councillor Durston.
Thank you. So just to say, I base my decision today on what I've got from the officers, from reading the papers, and I take accountability for my decisions rather than looking for ways to defer decisions or trying to pin things on officers. Having said that, in regards to this application, understanding that the outline planning permission has already passed the principle of housing, I still feel that the details on this must be acceptable, and I'm just not convinced today that they are, based on concerns over biodiversity and accessibility on the site. This is a really ancient and important part of, one of the few remaining sites in Bristol that has that kind of level of biodiversity on it, and we need to look at what we're doing there really carefully. And I just don't feel happy that that is what this application has done on this occasion. So I will be minded to refuse it based on the evidence that's been presented to us here today. That is my decision.
Thank you. Councillor Classic.
Thank you. I mean, it sounds like other people have concerns about whether we go forward with this or not, but if we do, I share a lot of the same opinions as Councillor Eddy. My ward councillor colleagues have raised concerns with Brislington Meadows even being on the list. They've, being for development, they have opposed it previously, but that fight has already happened in terms of the outline planning. Today, it's not really a question of whether we do or don't build on Brislington Meadows, it's what we build on Brislington Meadows. Realistically, that is what the outline planning is on this site. I don't think this scheme is perfect, but we've interrogated it and we've asked those questions, and I think it is a scheme that has merit, and I would worry that a bad decision could lead to something worse being built there. So if we don't defer this decision, it will be something I'll be voting for.
Thank you. I think you highlight a real danger, Councillor Classic, of the decision being taken out of our hands again. Councillor Stone?
I'd like to just say that, first of all, the council did originally refuse the application, and then it went to the inspectorate that got overturned. So let's just be mindful of our refusal initially at the beginning of all this long journey for so many years ago. It has been overturned, and therefore the outline planning permission has been granted by the inspectorate, not by Bristol City Council. So let's just be reminded of that. So we are here, and the information that I have in front of me today is just, for me, is not good enough. So, I've explained again. I'd like to see about the flooding risk, the levels, the topography, the mitigation for biodiversity. All these things have to be reconsidered, and the information is just not there for me to make a meaningful decision. So therefore, I will be refusing this application.
Councillor Pontley, you wish to comment again?
Final thought, Chair.
Really good.
Just to say. What Councillor Classic said, I appreciate the sentiment. There is a risk of that. I've been on this committee before, so I've seen that happen, where one bad scheme is rejected only for a terrible scheme to come along later and get through. The problem with this and where we are now is to my mind, this. What was settled at outline stage was settled by a planning inspector looking at it because Bristol City Council had failed to determine the application in time. And the outline planning was settled based on the idea that the conditions, the reserved matters, would be delivered. One of the conditions that he set out, to my mind, has not been delivered. And the feeling was of councillors at the time when they voted for Councillor Eddy's motion, and the feeling of the administration of this council, of which you were a part, Chair, was that this site couldn't be brought forward without too big of a compromise, which is why it was removed from the site allocations document. And we do, I'm sure Simone would advise us, we still have legal obligations towards the developer who has the outline planning permission. We have to, in good faith, look at the reserve matters and their attempts to fulfill them based on what the policy was then and the reserve matters and what the policy is now. But what this committee is saying, I think, is that we find it lacking. The conditions suggested by the inspectors are not met, and they're not met within the plain English and legal definition of the words used. So once you take out the idea that we should be thinking about, oh, we might get appealed, there might be costs. When you actually look at what's in the report, has it been fulfilled? The answer is really clear. No, it hasn't, and therefore we can't accept it.
What hasn't been fulfilled?
We have a laundry list, Chair, of we'll get back to you on this. We'll look into this, but we promise it'll be okay. We're convinced it'll be okay. Apologies for using such a crass summary of what is a very well-written technical document. But what it says is, we've not got there yet. Over and over and over again. But trust us, we're ready for you to delegate it to officers to make a final decision. What it sounds like the committee is saying is, no, we're not convinced. And given that the whole thing is contingent on a third-party decision, in respect of the first hurdle, the BNG assessment, we're not ready to sign this off yet, I don't think.
Well, obviously the vast majority of planning decisions in this council are delegated to officers, and it's clearly set out in the scheme of delegation which ones are to be made at committee and which are to be delegated to officers. If you don't agree with that, then obviously we need to look at our constitution, but I think that the government's new national scheme of delegation will come in before we have time to do that, and I personally welcome that. Okay. We do not make the final decision in this committee. The sign-off finally comes from officers. We make an in-principle decision here and officers sign it off at the end. That is the way it works in every local planning authority all around the country. Thank you. Right, we will move now to the vote. So we have the officer recommendation before us. Councillor Eddy, for or against?
You'll need a seconder, Chair.
Seconder, yes. Councillor Eddy, you want to second it? Thank you. Councillor Eddy, for? Councillor Al-Maghrabi?
Against.
Against. Councillor McCowie?
Against.
Councillor Stone?
Against.
Councillor Poultney?
Against.
Councillor Classic?
For.
Councillor Durston?
Against.
Councillor Breckles?
Against.
And myself for. So we have how many for and how many against?
1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 against.
Okay, so that falls. Okay, according to our process, then we will be deferring this, but I will need reasons for that deferral. Councillor Pulteney, those are you?
I was raising my hand to second your inevitable moving of the next motion, Chair.
Great.
The deferral motion.
Okay, then I move the deferral, but I will need to have some reasons for that.
I will give you as a starter for 10 the BNG report that must be signed off and agreed in writing prior, and I would strongly recommend that that comes to this committee. Strongly recommend. In fact, I would be almost up for conditioning that application must come concurrently to the committee as recommended in the officer's report. Starter for 10, Chair. I'm sure other members will have more.
Okay, that's one thing, or there's a whole list of things you want as well, or what? Was that just the one thing that you want included in the reasons for deferral?
The BNG assessment, along with the full site condition survey and habitat survey, as set out in the officer's report, needs to come to the committee in the way outlined within the inspector's decision and in the officer's report today. I think this committee needs to see that before any further decision is made. We need to know any contingencies upon which that biodiversity net gain strategy is based, such as permission from an additional landowner and what the status of that decision process is. We haven't even had a chance really to discuss the issues around traffic and transport, but I know that there are concerns around the overloading.
Well, that's because it wasn't before us. It was never before us. Under our own scheme of delegation, it was never before us. That's our constitution.
Apologies, but the decision that we're expected to make on these reserved matters is contingent on something already having happened, as it says on the report. So I'm saying that has to happen.
Okay, we'll just have to disagree on that one. I think officers have outlined the situation very clearly, but it's not something you accept.
Apologies, the officers have. What they've done is say that the word submit and the word decide means the same thing.
No, I don't think they have, but I say we'll disagree on that. So you wish, is that enough, do you think, for us to defer it on that basis? That we would bring back the BNG thing to this committee? Is that meaningful enough for you to deal with, Simone?
The issue is the BNG is a separate application. It's not the reserved matters. So actually what you need to give us is a reason why you're wanting to review this application. We cannot accept other reasons for refusal afterwards. So you need to give us your high-level outline reasons for refusal now so that we can work up those in detail and give you advice on their robustness. That's what can then come back at the next committee.
Councillor Pulteney, do you have a reason we can actually respectably move on with for why this is being deferred?
I will happy to state that I think that should be one of the reasons. I leave it to officers to take it away and look at what they bring back in the report to a subsequent committee as they go. I think we should also look at the issue, the accessibility standards, the issues around highways and the equalities issue that Councillor Stone focused on.
I think we will take the accessibility as a thing we will move forward with. I think the other one, officers are trying to be helpful to allow us not to expose ourselves to ridicule when the inspector. We want to make a decision which is at least credible in the sense is defensible to some degree. That's what officers are trying to help us to do. And I would suggest that the accessibility point made by Councillor Stone is a better one than asking for something that in our constitution we're not supposed to be even looking at this meeting.
Apologies, Chair, but we're not giving you reasons to refuse for a refusal decision today. We're providing suggestions for the officers to go away and write up. As we've heard so often on this committee, it's for officers to advise the committee on what weight to give each of these things. But that's the purpose of what we're doing. We're not looking for a bare minimum here. We're looking, I would suggest, for as many things as possible that we need further officer advice on. I would also suggest that the public rights of way issue is one to look at. The flooding issue is another one that we should look at. There are dozens of issues that have been raised in specific.
The public rights of way was a completely separate.
Interruption, Chair.
I know I'm on the committee, so please don't bring that one up, Guy. Can we just stick to the one, and will you be satisfied with that?
We can't stick to the one. We need more than one. We need more than one.
I'm giving advice to the councillors that the decision they are now making is not very credible and is not going to stand up to examination by the inspector. That is my considered advice, and it is the advice also of officers. They are entitled to make what decision they like, but I and officers are trying to help residents of Brislington and councillors make a sound decision. Councillor Stone, do you have something better to...
I just want to just read out. It says condition 27 of the over planning, the outline planning permission requires combined ecological mitigation method statements. Can we not see those? The first reserve matters submissions, as we've been discussing, shall include, it says here, shall include combined ecological mitigation method statements. So I want those brought back to the committee as part of this deferral or part of refusing, so that we can have a fulfilled plan along with evidence of flood risk mitigation, along with obviously Disability Act enabling, of 1987. I'm concerned about the slopes of the build. So these are three things that we can bring back to this committee to have a conversation about.
Okay, the method statements are in your papers. So that would not be a good thing to suggest to the inspector that we want to ask for, because we've been given it and should have read it by now. So I think perhaps if we just stick to the accessibility, it won't improve the situation to add things which are not credible. Councillor Poultney.
Chair, if I may, what you are doing is taking the issues that are raised by this members of committee as though they will be applied to the inspector's standard. As we've heard from officers today in respect to other decisions, that's not the decision we're making. We're asking officers to look at these issues and come back to us with advice for a decision in the future. So these aren't things that are going to face the inspector's wrath, because when we make this decision, we'll have robust advice from officers on all of them. But I tell you what, when they come back, I would really like it if this committee was in a position where it could look more favourably on the reserve matters and the conditions being imposed, because those conditions being, and the things being suggested, are in line with what the inspector told us these conditions needed to deal with.
Good.
So we have a number of things that have already been suggested, Chair. Quite a significant number, I would suggest.
Okay, those things have been logged. And should this application come back to a committee in this council, then those will be the things on which officers will base their objections. There is, Councillor Poultney?
I just want to be clear, Chair, given that we've had quite a terse, if it's not too mean to say so, discussion around this. What I wouldn't want to see is that we then see an officer's report at the next committee saying, well, the committee raised these few issues, so everything else can be taken to be okay. Everything else was fine. There are more issues that have been raised in public forum and the report and by the inspector.
Please do not preempt the officer's report. They are going to go away and write it with their normal diligence and professionalism. And should this application come back to a committee in this council, which it may or it may not, then they will include all of those in it. Can I ask for a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Poultney, you're seconding that, are you? Thank you very much. Councillor Eddy, you for that?
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor El-Maghrabi? For. Councillor McCowie?
Yes, for.
Councillor Stone?
For.
Councillor Poultney?
For.
Councillor Classic?
Abstain.
Councillor Durston?
Abstain.
Councillor Breckles?
For.
Myself, abstain. Alison?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, and 1,
It is carried. So we now have a 5-minute break before the next one, which takes us to 15:44, which is when we start. Land next to River Cattle Market Road. I think there probably needs some punctuation in that, but there we are. And the first person is Professor Judith Squires, I believe. Professor Squires, thank you very much. There is a roving microphone there.
I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak on behalf of the University of Bristol in support of Legal & General's planning application. Temple Quarter represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity to deliver inclusive growth for the city. And we are keen to ensure that the momentum generated by the university's investment in Temple Quarter Enterprise Campus is maintained, so that the wider renewal of this part of the city can be realised. L&G's proposal for Temple Island complements the university's ambitions by delivering a mix of high-quality spaces and amenities that help establish the area as a dynamic, welcoming destination for visitors, businesses and residents. The scheme promises to deliver meaningful benefits for local communities, high-quality employment opportunities and a route to delivering much-needed affordable homes. We ask the Planning Committee to support this application and the positive contribution it makes to Bristol's future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Squires. Councillor Stone, you missed, unfortunately, the beginning of the public forum, so you will not be able to participate in this particular item. Mark Ashdown.
Thank you, Chair. This application will have a substantial harmful impact on existing heritage assets and the character and appearance of the nearby Silverthorn Lane conservation area. The TVIAs show grey mass clothing several familiar views to local people. The density and height, along with its monotonous architectural design, undermines the historic character and integrity of this part of the city. The design needs to be exemplary architecture. It is not. It is value engineered, anywhere architecture that can be seen across the city and in Bristol and in cities beyond, which stands beside one of Bristol's most iconic buildings. In this instance, the proposal does not provide sufficient public benefits that would outweigh the permanent harm caused. Therefore, it does not accord with the requirements of paragraphs 210, 212, 213, 214 and 219 of the NPPF and the relevant local plan heritage policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Roger Gimpson.
Thank you, Chair. I represent Bristol Walking Alliance. We strongly object to the current outline proposals for Temple Island because of an inadequate provision for access from the A4 Bath Road. The plans propose providing an entrance to the site from the footway along the east side of the Bath Road, but the footway is far too narrow and unsafe to meet even current standards, and the footway is shared with cyclists and e-scooters. The plans propose several flights of steps to reach Temple Island from the A4, making it inaccessible for many. No building is shown which could accommodate a lift. Active Travel England highlighted this as a critical design issue, but it has not been addressed in the application. In the report to the committee before you, Transport Development Management say that they have consistently expressed concern about the impact of the development on Bath Road and would prefer improvements are funded and in place prior to the development being delivered. The report promised that an amendment sheet would address this, but it does not. We urge committee members, therefore, to defer these proposals until adequate plans have been incorporated for the access to Temple Island from and including the A4 Bath Road. Thank you.
Thank you. David Redgewell, I don't believe, is David here? No, I don't think so. Teresa, who is speaking on behalf of Teresa? Tottenham residents. No, nobody, thank you. Mr. Ben Denton.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Ben Denton and I'm Head of Strategy at Legal & General, leading our investment in and management of affordable housing across the UK. L&G's ambitious regeneration proposals for this site will bring new energy, activity and employment to Bristol, and that's why we're so committed to ensuring that they are delivered. L&G will be the long-term owner and operator of the commercial space, the market-rented homes and the affordable homes on the site. So we have an enduring interest in creating a successful, welcoming place for Bristol's communities. Despite the viability challenges facing the development, L&G will be contractually committing to delivering 20% affordable on the site. The funding for the affordable homes will combine L&G's own capital with grant from Homes England to bridge the viability gap. L&G is one of the largest developers of affordable housing in the country, and the grant for these homes will come from the government's £39 billion affordable housing programme. And the project is at the top of L&G's list of regeneration commitments, but is also a top priority for Homes England. Finally, the 20% affordable housing will predominantly be social rent, supporting L&G's and the Council's commitments to deliver inclusive mixed communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Victor Arrive.
Hello, my name is Victor Arrive, and I'm Associate Director at Sahardid Architects.
Welcome.
We're proud to bring our experience in delivering international projects and transformative master plans to the regeneration of Temple Island. Over several years, our team has refined the design in response to the evolution of the area to ensure strong integration with the University of Bristol new campus, the new eastern entrance, the Temple Meads, and the wider Temple Quarter. At the heart of this vision is people, so we have designed a welcoming, walkable, and cycling-friendly neighborhood that will improve connectivity in the area, but will also become a new vibrant destination in its own right. Sustainability has guided every single design decision, from the layout of the master plan to the materials we selected. And the result is a strong and unique design that is inspired in the site's industrial heritage, but also in the riverside character, where the mix of uses around the public square will nurture a healthy community and a high-quality public realm for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Sally Davis.
Good afternoon, members. Bristol City Council has an ambitious vision for Temple Quarter, a place to be built on partnerships, delivering homes, jobs, investment, cultural celebration, and environmental revitalisation. This application is a major milestone on the roadmap to its delivery. Temple Island is a key location for high-density mixed-use growth. The proposals will deliver 520 homes and significant employment space within the city centre, where brownfield land is a finite resource. Major public realm investment will extend Bristol's network of waterside routes and incorporate a connection to the Bath Road, knitting Temple Quarter with surrounding neighbourhoods. Legal & General has worked closely with BCC officers and stakeholders. This partnership approach is reflected in the express support of Bristol University, Temple Quarter LLP, Business West, and your own officer's recommendation to approve. I urge members to approve this application to unlock L&G's £350 million investment in our city.
Thank you. Gordon Isgrove.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members.
Good afternoon.
I'm a Bristol-based chartered surveyor with nearly 3 decades of experience working on developments across the city. I fully support this application for the following reasons. Legal & General will own and manage this place for decades. As one of the UK's largest pension funds, their returns depend on not a quick profit, but on the long-term performance of what they create. A mixed, thriving and well-managed community is the objective. The alignment of commercial interests with quality outcomes is an incredible opportunity for the city, and the committee should recognise it as a significant material advantage of this particular applicant over others. The scheme will extend the momentum of the University of Bristol's new enterprise campus and support the wider Temple Quarter regeneration. There will be economic and social benefits that will be delivered, providing the opportunity for new employers and jobs, as well as business rates that will benefit the city. This brownfield site has been derelict for decades and forms an underwhelming arrival point to the city. The proposal offers a long overdue opportunity to create a positive, dynamic gateway alongside the university's investment. I would recommend this application to the members.
Thank you. Finally, on my list is Kim Hicks, although if anybody else is waiting to give a statement.
The height and massing of this development, situated close to delightful historical architecture of the listed buildings at Temple Meads, will have a hugely dominant and negative impact, radically changing the character of this part of Bristol. It will restrict views of the city as you approach from the Bath side and obstruct views of the characterful Totterdown escarpment from the other direction. The Civic Society would like to see a far more sensitive development that creates more intimate and friendly public spaces and is far less harmful to major views. The current choice of dark grey building materials only serves to emphasise the looming, blocky solidity of these buildings. They will be depressing to look at and live and work amongst, especially in dull and damp weather. This development requires a major redesign that results in a fresh and welcoming approach to Bristol and is in keeping with the brightness of Temple Meads. It should not be a grim reminder of the dirty, grimy, smoke-stained buildings of industrial Britain. We must ask better from our developers. Please refuse this application.
Mr. Andrew Kemp, is Mr. Andrew Kemp here? Right, in that case, that's everyone on my list. So we move now to the officer presentation and hand over to Peter. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm on. This is a hybrid application that's before you today for land next to the River Avon at Cattle Market Road, now known as Temple Island. So as a hybrid application, it is in two parts. There is a detailed element, which is for an office block, which I'll hereafter refer to as office number 1, and that's how it's set out in your papers. And then an outline with all matters reserved for subsequent approval. There are the uses that are set out there. The application comes before you as the culmination of significant pre-application and indeed application work over a number of years actually to reach this stage before you. And I'll address some of the points that have been raised in the public forum as I go through this ahead of your questions. You'll be very familiar with the application site, but that is the red line as we have it. The Temple Island is to the south, as you know, of Temple Meads Station and indeed the campus for the University of Bristol. The application proposal includes 520 homes, which the applicants at this stage indicate will be a mix of 1, 2, 3 bed and studio apartments. Office accommodation, as I've mentioned, one office block being in detail, approximately 14,000 square metres, and an office block in outline. The application proposal includes a hotel with conference facilities, a flexible commercial use building, and just to kind of underline what I've set out in my report, that is a building which is for start-up businesses, and I've set out there, I think if you're familiar with the engine shed, that's how I imagine it coming forward. But I would stress that the detailed proposals for that building would be a matter for a reserved matters application at a later date. Public realm, the landscape concept has evolved to enable the site to be developed flexibly over time using a kit of parts approach, and I'll set that out in a bit more detail in a few moments. So we have a proposed illustrative layout, and that you can see there before you includes the office, the area hatched in pink. That is the detailed element of the site. To the north of that, you'll see University of Bristol, who have planning permission for student accommodation on that part of the island site. Then to the south of the office is office number 2, a hotel development which has significantly been set back from the Bath Road to enable improvements at a future date to Bath Road to be made. In that bottom right-hand corner is the flexible office building, and then the residential alongside the River Avon in 4 blocks. To give you an idea of the proposed layout, I've included that illustrative plan to give you an idea as well of heights of the blocks coming forward. You'll be familiar with the fact that there are also blocks on the opposite side of the road, development happening as we speak, in fact, along Albert Road. This is the office development as proposed. Never really that helpful in a two-dimensional plan, but it gives you an idea of the office block as come forward, and there are details within your committee papers of that. In addition, there is an illustration just to give you an idea of how it would look. I've included that. I'll skip over that because I've done that. Then there is building heights. Again, the number of stories involved at this stage to illustrate how the development can accommodate the amount of development proposed. I mentioned landscape kit of parts approach, and that shows how the site has been developed. This, as the applicants have set out, is a scheme which is going to take a decade to complete, and therefore it needs to have elements that stand alone in their own right. I'd stress again that as the proposal for approval of reserved matters comes forward for Office 2, that will be a standalone application with all the details of it, as will the hotel, as will the residential element, as will the flexible building, and details there. So I just wanted to set that out to give you an idea that landscaping is integral to this proposal. And there's an idea of how the site would be set out, the landscape proposals. Before I get on to some other matters, that's just an illustration that's looking south towards the proposed hotel. I'd stress this is illustrative, and we do not know yet what the buildings, or indeed what the colour of the buildings will be. That will be a matter for a reserved matters application when the design will come forward. And just sorry to add on to that, that there would be the same round of consultations for each reserved matters application as there has been for this outline, this hybrid application, sorry. Now we need to address a key part that has been highlighted in the public forum, and that is confidence that the Bath Road improvements will be forthcoming. Transport colleagues are concerned that Bath Road in its current form, accommodating all this development, they have concerns about the impact on Bath Road at this stage. Therefore, as officers, we are saying that the achievement of permeability throughout the site must be achieved as soon as possible. That's a key factor in this. The applicants recognise too that Bath Road needs to be improved and have accepted the principle of the inclusion of an informative which sets out that all parties are committed to working together on a best endeavours basis to secure improvements to Bath Road. But what can we actually do? Stress that each reserved matters application will require an assessment of the impact for its access and as part of that impact on Bath Road as they come forward. So each subsequent reserved matters following on for Office 2 and the rest of the development, each one will have to have a transport assessment and would have to demonstrate at that point in time, remembering that this scheme is going to take a long time to come forward in detail, they'll have to assess the impact at that particular moment. You'll see as well, and I've included that, and I know that the PowerPoint was circulated to you, that the transport colleagues are working towards strategic funding for improvements to highways across the city, and this is one of the priorities, to improve Bath Road. So all parties understand that there is a need to improve Bath Road. But what can planning do? What can this planning application do? Well, as part of the recommendation would be, is included a planning condition for the phasing of development to understand how this whole thing will come forward and what stages and so on. And in discharging that condition, there would be the overall requirement to set out what the impact on Bath Road would be if that part of the development comes forward. So phasing would be a key part of it. And then as a fallback situation, a Grampian condition would be included to set out what development can come forward before the Bath Road link is provided. Just another thing, just to mention at this juncture on Bath Road and the access to it, the details, the steps, lift and so on, are matters for a future reserve matters application. So they would come forward at a later stage. So we don't have detailed plans of how that would work at this particular moment. I just wanted to highlight, I know they mentioned in the public forum, this representation arrived yesterday, so I missed the amendment sheet, but I wanted to include it just to say that Business West have indicated their support. So finally, key benefits of this scheme. This is a sustainable development of a brownfield site in a city centre location. It's an important development for the overall Temple Quarter regeneration and will bring forward wider, it will be a catalyst for wider benefits for Temple Quarter coming forward. It will provide additional housing, 520 apartments. It will provide employment, office and hotel, including the provision of around 3,000 full-time jobs. And finally, it will provide a planned public realm, including play areas and a riverside walkway. So, Chair, the recommendation is that planning permission be granted subject to conditions and a Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Questions from councillors, please. Who's the first? Councillor Portney.
Thanks, Chair. Apologies, I just wanted to get some clarity on something that's been raised in both the public forum and that was something that was members were emailed about a little while ago and also within the planning portal, and that's to say the NHS contributions, which has been a repeated issue that's come back to this committee again and again. This time we were emailed with case law, that's to say one from Stratford-on-Avon and the other from North Yorkshire, both cases in which the planning inspector had added conditions as necessary, reasonable and proportionate planning applications that included contributions such as this under circumstances that seem similar. And I was hoping to get Jim or Peter's view on it. Jim, sorry.
Over to you, Peter. Yeah, I mean, that came, as members will be aware, they received this, the letter from the NHS late last week, I think. And our planning solicitors have been, sorry, let me move around. Our planning solicitors have been looking at it and are in the process of drafting a response. Like with many things, you can find multiple appeal decisions that support and go against what you want to show. And in this particular instance, whilst those two decisions do allow for contributions to be made, the view of legal services is that the reason that the inspectors allowed for the contributions to be made was primarily because the ICB in that particular area, be it Stratford or North Yorkshire, was able to demonstrate what and where the money would be spent on. They had a scheme to deliver. There was going to be a facility that was planned to be delivered, or there was an extension to an existing surgery that was planned to be delivered, and the scheme would contribute towards that. And that's, as members of this committee and Committee B will be rather tired of me saying over the last few weeks and months, that's where we find that the ICB in Bristol, that's where we fall down a little bit, in that whilst we are very supportive and sympathetic towards the fact that we need new health infrastructure, the advice that we are still getting from our solicitors is that what they are asking for in this particular case, as with other recent cases, doesn't fulfil the regulatory tests, because there is no clarity or no certainty as to where the facility will be, that it will ever come forward, that there will ever be enough funding from this scheme and or other schemes to deliver it, and also the ongoing issue that we seem to be struggling a little bit with the ICB, which is their insistence on, when they're trying to calculate an obligation, they are steadfast in their view that they should always use, or we should always accept, that the obligation should be based on a yield, in effect, of 2.4 people from every dwelling that is being constructed. And that's on the basis that across Bristol, if you divide the population of Bristol, as in the 21 census, by the number of dwellings, you get 2.4. However, the census also provides much more nuanced information, which will tell you that from a one-bedroom dwelling or a two-bedroom dwelling or four-bedroom house, etc., you get very different individual figures out, and a one-bed flat generates about 1.3 people, not 2.4 people. So when you actually apply the more nuanced figures in the census, which the ICB have been provided with, you would get a contribution that was quite significantly lower than what they're asking for. So not only do we have the issue that we can't really be confident at the moment that they have a scheme that they could deliver, we also have an issue that we feel what they're asking for is overinflating the amount that it should be provided. So that's where we are on this. But our solicitors are sort of happy that we are in the right place in saying that we don't feel we can support the obligation in this particular instance. That said, we are progressing quite quickly now with the work that the Director of Economy of Places commissioned to look at how we could maybe use strategic SIL in a more effective way. I've certainly had a couple of meetings with the consultants who are doing that work, and I think the ICB are going to be invited to meetings with the consultants. The leadership team of the council are going to be involved in those meetings, and I think Councillor Brown is actually sitting further down. I think the ICB have a meeting with him coming up in the next couple of weeks. So everyone wants to work together to find a solution, and I think progress is being made. We think the solution is likely to be through the direction of strategic SIL, but in this particular instance, we remain of the view that a planning obligation can't be supported, and that's consistent with where we've been over the last few schemes that have come to committee, with the exception, of course, of Broadmead, where there was an absolute obvious piece of mitigation, because if the Gallery shopping centre is demolished, then the surgery there will be demolished with it, and a replacement will need to be found, which has a cost. So in that particular instance, we were very clear that we could support an obligation because there was a clearly defined need and a clearly defined location where the replacement would go.
Quickly, Guy, please, because I've got Councillor Eddy afterwards.
Just a quick follow-up, if I may. One was just to suggest, appreciating the 2.4 figure might be an undercount in some ways, but the last census was also done in the middle of lockdown when the overwhelming bulk of the student population of Bristol had left. I'm sure Professor Squires would tell you that a lot of students live at higher densities than 2.4 to a dwelling. So it's just worth bearing in mind that number may also be an underestimate in some ways. But the query I had was, I can hear inspectors' voices in my head from previous applications. In respect of the NHS, is this not something that we could condition, as in to say, as part of this outline planning consent, that upon production of the scheme, the NHS may wish to put this towards, as it develops, given the likely timescales involved, that they would then become eligible for such a sum of money?
So probably, I mean, the other issue that we have to bear in mind on this particular scheme, which I didn't cover in my previous long rambling answer, is of course the fact the scheme's unviable. And the scheme's unviable in planning terms to the tune of tens of millions of pounds. So we have a package of planning obligations that have been agreed, those absolute essential transport things primarily. And the question really, which I would somewhat unkindly back to you, would be, let's pretend that the council did feel it was able to seek a planning obligation. Then the question to be batted back would be, instead of what? Because something else would have to give. So we wouldn't necessarily then be getting the planning obligations for the transport measures that Peter's partly outlined that are necessary to mitigate the impact of the development. I think one of the other concerns that we have is that if we were to go down the route of notwithstanding what I've already said, of seeking an obligation, because of the fact that the ICB are not advanced in their planning, they don't have a site allocated or a site identified, etc., etc. There's a very real danger that a contribution could be sought and paid, and then 5, 6, 7 years down the line, the facility's still not been provided, and the contribution have to be returned to the developer. And in that instance, in effect, it's a lose-lose for the City Council, because we're not collecting the money for highways, which we've said we don't need because we'll have it for health instead, and then we're having to give it back. So we do need to be mindful of a whole range of things there. But on the potentially would-be ways that if a council was minded to approve a contribution towards health facilities, whereby you could decide when the monies were payable at a certain point in time, maybe not on commencement. The ICB are very adamant that they want monies on commencement. But as it stands at the moment, we just don't think that what is proposed is in accordance with the tests. And because we're determining the application now, I know reserve matters will come down the line at any point in a number of years. Because we're determining the application now, we have to make the decision now on the obligations that we're seeking. And at this point in time, based on the advice we've got, we don't feel we can support an obligation, a financial contribution a financial contribution towards the ICB.
Thank you. Councillor Eddy?
Thank you, Chairman. I recognise that the viability study confirms affordable housing itself per se isn't deliverable, but I welcome L&G's commitment to secure funding for up to 20%. Looking at the list of conditions on pages 101 to 102, am I right? Any agreed provision of that would feature in the Section 106 agreement?
Jim's point, I'll start and then Jim can come in. The strict planning answer for this planning committee is that planning cannot insist upon affordable housing. So no is the answer to your question. We can't condition it. We can't say off the back of this planning application there will be 20% affordable housing. It has to be zero because they've gone through the legal process of a viability assessment that's been independently assessed and it's come back at zero. However, in this case, the applicants have been very clear, and I've set this out in the committee papers, that they are still committed to the delivery of affordable housing by other means. So that's where. So in a sense, I have to leave them to that and for them to do that aside from this planning application. Jim, do you want to add to that?
Just very, very quickly, that I think whilst the council as a corporate body has every confidence that 20% affordable or maybe even more, what have you, will be delivered through measures outside of the planning system by L&G, in putting applications in front of members to determine, we have to be applicant blind. As a general rule, planning is we're not granting a personal planning permission to L&G, we're granting a planning permission for development of this site. And it is possible, though highly unlikely, that we might not sell a site to L&G or L&G might sell a site onto somebody else. So we have to work on what we can do through the planning system, and if the planning system is satisfied that the scheme cannot provide affordable housing in accordance with the council's policies, i.e. subsidy-free, then other than a late-stage viability review where we can look at things later, any affordable housing secured outside of the planning system cannot go into a Section 106 agreement. And it actually is not beneficial for us to try and put it into a 106 agreement because Homes England, who are the grant funders of most affordable housing, will not touch any affordable housing that is tied up in any way, shape or form in a Section 106 agreement.
Okay, Councillor Durston.
Thank you. Could you just, it would be helpful to know what are some of the kind of key reasons that makes this site so difficult in terms of viability?
Or Councillor Durston, we haven't got all night, have we? it's in the city centre, it's lots of tall buildings, and viability generally. And I think I put something in Peter's report in the section. There's a whole range of things that have made development particularly, or high density development particularly challenging over the last few years. Labour costs have gone up significantly since the UK left the European Union. Power costs have gone up significantly since Russia invaded Ukraine. Materials costs have gone up significantly since the COVID pandemic. The Building Safety Act, which was rightly brought in to deal with the appalling outcome of Grenfell, has resulted in tall buildings having to have 2 stairwells, 2 sets of cores, which basically means you're building a lot more and selling less of what you build. The gross to net, in effect, is different, and the cores are the expensive bits of buildings to build. So all in all, tall buildings generally in Bristol are well, everywhere actually. London, Bristol are particularly challenging to build. And it's not unusual that we find with virtually all schemes that come forward that are for housing, it is very difficult to find viability in these city centre planning schemes at the moment. Legal and General, assuming they are going to be the end developer, may well be able to develop the scheme out because they will have their own way of funding a scheme which will be different from the standard parameters that we have to put into a viability assessment in assessing a planning application. So because they are in effect their own funder, they don't have to go to funders, they're a pension fund, you know, they may not need to borrow money on the financial markets, etc., etc. So they may take a very different view on profit, as I think it's previously been mentioned by someone in the public gallery. So they may well be able to bring the scheme forward, but in standard planning terms, it's very challenging and really fairly unviable.
So is there anything kind of really specific to this site over kind of other sites, or is it the kind of general viability challenges that we face with most kind of city centre development?
Yeah, most sites will be much of a muchness. I mean, we did highlight in the committee report the hotel's an odd one, because the hotel costs about £10 million to build and its end value. So your question is, why is it being built? And we did put that question to the applicant, and they put a response back to us, which I've put verbatim into the report for you to see, and their justification really is that, well, that's part of good placemaking, and it's the right place for a hotel near the major transport interchange in the city, etc., etc., etc. And you know, planning is about more than just putting lots of flats in. It's about good quality placemaking, and it forms part of their ambition for the site.
Thank you. Councillor Stone, you're not participating in this application because you weren't here for the beginning of it. Councillor Brackles?
Sorry, I was slightly late by 2 minutes. That does not allow me not to participate.
I'm afraid you missed the beginning of it.
I went for a bottle of water. I really was thirsty. I needed
I'm sorry, you missed the beginning of the public forum for this
you
application.
Could stop. You knew I wasn't here. You could actually waited for me for 30
I'm sorry,
seconds.
I started at the time that I said
you
that
started at your time, which was 5 minutes, was probably not exactly 5 minutes to be
Believe
exactly
it or not,
truthful.
there is one objective time in this country. We don't have individual clocks.
It was your time. If
Councillor
I was to go back in
Brackles,
time,
continue,
that 5 minutes probably
please.
wasn't exactly 5
Okay,
minutes.
on the issue of accessibility, getting off from Bath Road, accessing it with foot or by cycle, are the planned Bath Road improvements going to address that before this is likely to be completed?
I think what we are saying is that they will have to. We are saying that at the moment, the full solution for Bath Road is unknown, and Transport colleagues are concerned. They have said that, and I've set that out in the report. And they didn't want to come in a minute. As the scheme evolves and as reserved matters applications come forward, as I set out in the presentation, we will see where Bath Road is at that stage, and we will assess the merits at that particular time. That's how we are addressing this. So it's kind of it's a project. So this is a key milestone. This is saying, in principle, okay, go ahead, but there is a lot more further work that will need to be done. Do you want, Jane?
Any further questions before we move to discussion? Councillor Portney.
Sorry, Chair, just to clarify, Democratic Services might wish to come in. Apologies, my reading was that a councillor that misses the start of a meeting may not participate in the decision. But that's not to say that Councillor Stone has done, I know, a lot of preparation work for this, can't necessarily ask questions or speak in the debate. But it was also to say, Councillor Stone, my recollection is, came in almost immediately after the first item of the first person in public forum started speaking. It may well be that Councillor Stone was able to hear everything, even if she hadn't sat down yet.
Yes, we had started, and we'd started at the time that I said that we would start. And there is no need for Councillor Stone to ask questions or participate in the discussion if Councillor Stone is not going to make a decision, and she shouldn't influence the other members on this committee either, because she's not part of that decision-making process. Do you have any other questions?
Chair, apologies, just to wonder, if the committee were concerned about the provision of an additional 520 homes in this space with no corresponding contribution towards medical services in the area, what conditions might officers suggest to allay our concerns? And the other was just whether there were any conditions that officers, let's say, might have been edge cases that officers were considering in relation to some of the transport concerns that have been raised here. I have to admit, some of what I read in the public forum I found quite sympathetic. It's not the easiest of sites to navigate or to move across from one side to the other, not least because there's a river and a railway station in the middle of it. So it would be good to have a sense of whether there were any additional conditions that officers had considered that might help put members' minds at ease. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. There are, I've listed, I think it's about page 100, the conditions, the headings for conditions such as they are, and if you as members of this committee consider that there is a need for additional ones, what I'm seeking is delegated authority to finalise the actual wording of the conditions. I think that the fact that this is a hybrid with the majority in outline, with everything needing to come forward for detailed design, then that means we've got a lot of scope to consider conditions on reserved matters applications, actually, against standards such as when they come forward. It's possible that they could come forward in the next 6 months. They could come forward in the next few years. I do not know yet the exact timing for it. So there is room for more conditions, but at this stage, I think we have sufficient cover in terms of design access to recommend permission for this hybrid application.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move on to the discussion? Okay, the discussion. Who would like to? Councillor Eddy.
I shall be mercifully brief, Chairman. You'll approve of this. I agree with the case officer. This is an excellent mixed, sustainable location. It's we're seeing a good blend, in my view, of employment use and housing, and it's quite pleasing. To be honest, it's not all student housing. There is some others. I certainly, if a hotel is built, personally, I think it's a better site for a hotel than an arena, but there we are. That's personal view. I'll be backing this.
I thought we were going to get to the end of that without a provocative comment, but we didn't. Councillor Breckles.
Yeah, I'll be backing this. I mean, the area, there's been a lot of regeneration in the Temple Meads area since the 90s with office developments that are fairly tall. I see no problem with the height or massing that's proposed. It's becoming the common sort of size and proportion of properties that are going up in the area. It's good that we're getting housing in there as well, rather than just exclusive office space. And a hotel, yeah, it's a good site for one. So yeah, it's a bit of a no-brainer for me. I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. Any further before we moved? Councillor Poultney? Councillor Durston, sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm also minded to support the officer's recommendations. Massive economic benefits. It's a really important part of the regeneration of our city centre. I do always have concerns when affordable housing isn't necessarily part of the application, but I think we wouldn't be getting that over the line if we didn't have the security of the 39 billion government funding to help get schemes like this delivered. So, yeah, happy to support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Durston. You may not object. No,
I'm sorry.
no,
I'm sorry.
can't.
He knew I was in the building. He knew, and he decided. He decided to start the meeting, knowing full well I wouldn't be able to participate, and that's the reason why he decided to do it. And I'm going to make a formal complaint about his action as chair because it's outrageous. Because all he had to do was wait for a few seconds because he knew I was in the building. It wasn't like I was not here. 5 minutes is his 5 minutes. Could be any 5 minutes. Could be an elongated 5 minutes.
Councillor Stone, I'm going to move on.
He made that choice, and it was the wrong choice. It absolutely undermines democratic procedures.
It doesn't. No, it isn't. Councillor Poultney, would you like to carry on, please? You were going to say something, were you not?
Carry on. We should actually just walk out of here, right now, because of the way that this person, this chair, has acted
you may
in
not
this
continue like
council.
this. I am entitled to have you removed from this meeting if I want for disturbing it. Okay? Councillor Poultney, do you have something to say?
I do, Chair, yeah. It's a matter of bitter regret that the meeting has reached this tone.
It is indeed.
But
you're really pushing me now.
Hang on, everyone.
Councillor Poultney, are you going to bring this back to the subject in matter? I've ruled on who is participating and who is not participating, and people may make what complaints they like about that. But I did speak to Democratic Services at the time, and we made that decision together, I believe, and that will be confirmed by the monitoring officer, I would suggest. Councillor Poultney, would you like to continue?
Yes, Chair. Could I, begging your indulgence, ask for one point of clarification? Or something you just said?
Yes.
You just said we made a decision together. Could I just ask whose decision that was?
Yes. A Democratic Service, Alison.
I did not make the decision along with the chair. I advised the chair that we were at the time to start and that Councillor Stone was not here already. And so the meeting was started, the chair's decision. We did not know when the councillor would return. So it was made, the decision was made to start at 3:45, which is the time the chair said we would restart.
If I may. Sorry, thank you. Apologies, everybody. Question asked, question answered. I do think this is something we should pick up offline, outside of this meeting.
Thank you.
Because this has been a continuous issue over the last almost year.
But it has not. It really has not.
Apologies.
Come along.
Okay.
Councillor Poultney, let's focus on what's in front of us in this meeting, please. This is this application.
If I may, and I would just, to reassure members of the public, or just for clarity as to what's going on, if councillors choose to walk out of this meeting, that means the decision will be taken in their absence, which is not ideal either. However, from where we're at, apologies, the statement I wanted to make on this was this. very often this committee faces a really tough decision to make between a load of competing priorities. If we're going to have high buildings, whether you agree with high buildings or not, I don't think anyone would disagree. This is where you would put them, right? It's brownfield land in the centre of town next to Temple Mead Station. There's nowhere else I would rather, I'll put it like that, have tall buildings. Equally, I live in a ward, I represent a ward that has been absolutely hammered with the proliferation of houses in multiple occupation, and I hope this will be the start, some of the return of those to family homes. However, whilst I recognise the benefits of this scheme, I do have concerns that we have continuously been pressured by the NHS around the provision of more and more housing units. I'm not saying this is a reason to refuse. I'm not saying this is a reason to vote against. I'm glad that progress is being made on this, but I'm genuinely slightly concerned when I look back on how many applications have come through this committee with the NHS saying, we need money for what you're granting here, the number of people you're bringing to the area. I represent an area which had a massive increase in density without any corresponding planning obligations. It stretched some services beyond breaking point and made others completely unviable. So the Section 106 and the SIL, I would say, is absolutely critical, and it's why I would really like to see, when the reserved matters for those planning obligations come back, that there be some political oversight. That could be that those decisions are made by officers in consultation with a committee chair, Councillor Brown somewhere around here, so it'll be his responsibility, or they could come back to committee as reserved matters. But I would really like to see something in the conditions that we agreed today, so I may move an amendment at the last minute. And I'm also aware that there were significant concerns raised around transport. Again, I would really like to see some sort of political oversight of the way that those planning obligations are determined prior to being decided.
Councillor Eddy.
In an effort to be shipshape in Bristol fashion, Chairman, can I formally propose the officer recommendation to approve?
You can, and I will happily second it. So I'll now move to the vote. Councillor Eddy.
Councillor, I would wish to propose an amendment and seek a seconder.
First of all, we vote on the officer recommendation. If that falls, then we can go for amendment. Is that not correct? Yes. That is correct, I believe. That is the
not in
way
line
forward.
with the proposal. Apologies, Chair, but just for clarity, I believe I will ask Democratic Services for clarification on this, that the motion to propose the recommendation, the officer's recommendation, must come from the chair, is what I believe it says. But you cannot,
it may come from the chair or from a person allowed or nominated by the chair.
And
I am happy that Richard proposes it, and I second it.
well, that's fantastic. And at that point, it becomes possible to move an amendment. It's not possible to move an amendment before then. I would like to move an amendment and seek a seconder.
Okay. The one that we have at the moment says that if the original is proposed and seconded, that we should then vote on that. That's what that one says. That if you look at the beginning.
You can have it moved and seconded, but then you can ask, somebody can put an amendment before you go for the vote on it. But that may fall away.
So, what is the amendment you wish to propose?
It was the officer's recommendation with two minor alterations. One, that the Section 106 SIL comes back to committee rather than being delegated finally to officers, and the same with the... that would encompass both, because that would deal with the NHS problem and the transport problem. So just to say that the Section 106 and SIL, in respect of the outline, would either come back to committee or would be signed off by the relevant committee chair. Does that make sense? If officers want to do it in a different way, it's just to safeguard the transport contribution and to see if there's any movement within the NHS situation once the plan comes forward.
Councillor Eddy, you have something to say to that?
I don't mind in principle if it's delegated to the chairman to agree or not. But it seems ridiculous to constantly saddle this committee with more and more business when there's a huge queue of planning applications.
Indeed, and we do have a process whereby some things are delegated and some are sent to committee, and there's a very clear scheme of delegation. So it seems to me if one brings in amendments that subvert the already existing scheme of delegation we have in the Constitution, there's a big discussion to be had there. So supposing we propose that those things are brought to the chair. Peter is going to help us here.
Yeah, just picking up on the Councillor Portney mentioned the community infrastructure levy receipts from this development SIL. The planning committee don't have authority to make decisions on how SIL is spent. That's a decision that's made outside of the planning forum. SIL is a tax, and it is a corporate decision as to how that's spent, primarily through the Strategy and Resources Committee. So I just wanted to highlight that because we're not in a position, the council isn't in a position where the planning authority can say, well, actually all the SIL from this development must be spent on X or Y or Z, because it just doesn't work like that, and we don't have those authorities to do that. On Section 106, obviously Pete's got a recommendation, the case officer's got a recommendation that says these are the obligations that we're asking you members to approve. So that's really an integral part of his report and the decision that you're being asked to make now.
Yes.
Sorry for
no,
coming in.
that's the correct assessment. Is that such an amendment would be a wrecking amendment, effectively? Yes. Yes, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Just really quickly, Councillor Poultney, you asked for political oversight on transport matters and also on NHS. Following on from what Jim has said on NHS, we have a good working relationship with the ICB, and this will be something which will be considered and move forward. On transport, we will have reserved matters applications which will address access, as I set out. So in that regard, my understanding from a planning officer perspective is that there is political oversight because those matters will be considered at reserved matters stage, and members have the opportunity, should they wish, to call those to committee. Not automatic, I can't guarantee, but they could do that. So there will be oversight. I just wanted to make that clear on those two matters.
No, thank you, Peter. That's very helpful. So all I'm saying is that what I'm seeking is to amend the officer recommendation in line with what you've just said, to ensure that it does, in fact, come back to committee as a reserved matter rather than being agreed by delegation. It's just the Section 106.
Is it your advice that that is not possible, to add a condition which would ensure the future process of this LPA?
So I would say that the Section 106 agreement must be entered into before the outline planning permission is granted.
Yes.
So, and a reserved matters application cannot be submitted to the committee before the outline. Oh, sorry, Peter, are you going to?
Just on this one, because the land is owned by Bristol City Council, we can grant today, hence this recommendation on your screen, before a Section 106 is signed. However, there will be a condition which will require a Section 106 is entered into, and that must be discharged in the usual way. So it's a slightly different one, whereas normally we resolve to grant subject to the completion of a 106. It's not the case here.
So your advice on such an amendment is?
Well, I think I'm kind of, I hoped I would help in terms of what's behind your request. And I think that the oversight of transport matters, the oversight of NHS matters moving forward is going to evolve as the reserved matters applications come in, and then we can consider it in the usual way. And then it will be considered as part of the planning application against whatever the standing is at that particular time. So I hope that helps in terms of kind of giving you the comfort rather than bringing back a legal document to a committee, because I'm not quite sure what you discuss really. It would be, the kind of bigger picture is taken care of. The 106 and what's going into it is listed on page 100 of my report. You can see that there. That's what we're asking you to consider today.
If I may just add, I think what Peter is saying is the amendment isn't necessary because there is already ample political oversight built into the process anyway, with all the reserved matters coming forward with the Strategy and Resources Committee overseeing the SIL allocations, and so basically there wouldn't be any value had from the amendment.
Thank you. Sorry, it was just to confirm. I would hate for us to find ourselves in a position where, at some point in the future, the reserve matters was coming back to this committee or any successor committee, only for members of the committee to be told, no, you agreed that at outline planning stage, because now there's no chance of getting that thing that we need, or actually we've not sorted this thing with the NHS, but now you've agreed it all.
No, this is a hybrid application, so there is detail on one section of it, but overall it's an outline application, so one will expect further applications. And as the situation becomes clearer as to what the applicant is attempting to do, then it will be in a firmer position to ask for specific contributions, and hopefully then, by then, the administration of the council, which is also a member of the Integrated Care Board, will have had those discussions and will have taken away from this committee this rather strange situation of it writing to itself to ask for money, which is not satisfactory and arguably is a rather weak form of political leadership result of. Okay, so now, Alex, would you like to comment?
If I may, Chair, sorry, I don't have a name tag. My name's Alex Hearn. I'm the Director of Economy of Place at the Council. I just wanted not to delve into the intricacies of what we've just discussed, but actually just a bit of broader context here. So this is in Temple Quarter and St Phillips, which is a key regeneration priority for the council and its partners. And it is absolutely in our interest that there will be primary healthcare facilities in the area. And we are in discussions with the ICB and the Temple Quarter Limited Liability Partnership about getting ready to prepare some more detailed thinking in time about what and where. Development in the area, including this site, will generate a lot of community infrastructure levy that can help contribute to its delivery. In relation to the transport as well, again, I'm not going to get into the technical points of this, but again, this is a key route into the area for Temple Quarter and St Phillips, and although it's not resolved at the moment, some work is underway around the design, and it will need funding. It's a substantial piece of kit. It will need funding. I just looked without, again, this is not necessarily a planning matter, but as Peter has just said, the council is a landowner here. This is not a development that can then go off and do what it wants after today. This in time, there will be an agreement between the council as a landowner, so we do continue to retain some control over what happens and when. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So the motion to approve as written down has been, I think, didn't you? Yes. It was moved by Councillor Eddy and I seconded it, and we now go around, and Councillor Eddy, would you vote for or against that?
For.
For. Councillor Al-Mughrabi?
For, yeah.
Councillor McCowie?
Yeah, for.
Councillor Poultney?
For.
Councillor Classic?
For.
Councillor Durston?
For.
Councillor Breckles?
For.
Myself, for. So that is unanimous. The time is now 16:50. We will reconvene at 5 o'clock
Chairman,
exactly.
with respect,
Yes.
we've had far too much, in my view, filibustering by Green members. Some of us actually have things to do later. Why don't we just progress and not actually adjourn?
I have promised to one member of this committee as part of a reasonable adjustment that I would give 5 minutes between each item. I also said that I would be very strict about that because I recognise that was a burden on all other members who had other needs. So that is why it is now 16:50 and we will recommence at 5:25. Okay. And we now move on to the third and final item on our agenda tonight, which is, and I know it, but I'm going to read out the actual description as we have it. King's Weston Avenue Open Space Footpaths. Okay, again, could do with some punctuation, but there we are. So we have a number of people from the public forum who wish to contribute. You have 1 minute each, and the first person I have on here is Mark Ashdown.
Thank you, Chair. My third attempt today. I realise that the comments I've made, and I hope you've all read them, are very technical and they relate to biodiversity net gain. And that, no doubt, the planners will tell you that the issue of biodiversity net gain is a post-approval condition and is not one that you need to be concerned with. However, this is a Bristol-owned site and a Bristol-owned application, and I would suggest that this council ought to set itself a much higher standard than it has. We are facing, and it's a technical matter, hard to understand what that means, a 17.75 habitat unit loss of this diversity. And that what will happen is that all of that biodiversity will have to be offset outside of Bristol. It will not be offset within Bristol, as the planning officer has suggested, because that's not permitted under the biodiversity net gain rules. So I implore you to consider the impact of this development on habitat and on nature. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think Maggie Woodward is now going to speak on behalf of herself and John Mackenzie, or on behalf of John. So, Maggie, welcome.
Thank you. On behalf of John. Chair and councillors, I'm speaking not to oppose investment in Lawrence Weston, but to say this application is not the right offer for the community it's meant to serve. There has been a clear lack of genuine co-design and co-production. Bristol City Council's own policies emphasise working with communities, but that hasn't happened in any meaningful way. Much of the engagement took place before COVID, and people's understanding of the value of free local green space has since changed significantly. That shift isn't reflected here. As a result, and due to limited transparency on fees, many residents believe that this will be a free-to-use park, when in reality this is a commercial leisure centre business. The scheme would also remove existing open space. The enclosed grass area where children currently learn to ride bikes for free would become a car park. This loss has not been properly mitigated or replaced. There are also transport concerns with insufficient detail on increased traffic. As it stands, this proposal falls short of the council's own standards. I urge you to reject it and request a redesign shaped with the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next person is Roger Speedo. Thank you, Roger.
Chair and committee. Lawrence Weston has high levels of deprivation, but would welcome a readily accessible cycling centre. This isn't one. We've tried hard to engage constructively, to fit our needs with the applicants, and even finance them, but have not been allowed to collaborate. This application recognises that the majority of open space would become inaccessible to the general public, i.e. our local residents day to day, especially the adjacent flatted estate where open space is so important to health. Social cohesion will be damaged, yet another loss of Lawrence Weston amenity, and will not be avoided by a week or two of free events. The fencing is needed in order to monetise access. Security is not an argument. Public events are routinely managed safely with public access. This is a business and has to run at some surplus. There are suitable and more happily accessed alternative sites, even locally. The app even cuts across the objectives of the formal neighbourhood development plan. Please refuse.
Thank you. Kim Tudor?
I'm speaking on behalf of a resident in Tedder Street, which is one of the new properties built in around about 2023, whereas the land and everything about it was actually reviewed as being okay in 2019. So 120 properties were built after the land was, allocated. She says, hang on, excuse me, I've got the wrong glasses on. Yeah, she couldn't make it to the meeting. Abby lives at 209 Tedder Street. Her front door is immediately opposite the car park entrance to this proposal. Her front door is less than 5 metres from the access road. And we are told in year 5, visitor numbers will be 112,000. That means 112,000 entering. Excuse me, can I sit down? Is that okay?
Yes, of course you can, Kim.
Yeah, thanks. I've got a condition that shakes. Means 112,000 entering and 112,000 leaving. A total of 224,000 visitors passing within 5 metres of her front door. Should how can anybody think this is acceptable? Also added to this is we've major concerns about the access, which is through the middle of a council estate road. I have photographs if anybody's interested. It's called Henacre Street, and it consists of something like 80 plus flats. There's no off-street parking, so how can you expect to have something like 270 vehicles going through this street that is just unsafe to even cross when you're walking? And also, Shahampton Planning Group have extensive concerns about the wildlife and protected species, especially in this case, bats obviously, badgers. They're closing 2 sets of currently used badger sets and relocating them. We don't think this is acceptable. Thank you. Oh, and slow rooms. There's the whole mixture, but definitely, I don't think we should be looking at closing badger sets because they're just so difficult to, re-establish.
Thank you, Kim. Stephen Wickham.
Working? Sorry.
Yeah.
Look, this isn't in my backyard. I put in 2 photographs. This looks on paper an exciting regional scale electric track for cyclists, but it does have the look of being a really good regional day out. Taunton, Cardiff, Swindon or Gloucester, just a family day out by motorway, easy to get into this estate, just over an hour away by car. But at the site, aren't the locals being trodden upon? A car and bus park of 1,500 square metres at least is of no use to them and may prove inadequate in capacity. It's substituted for their dog walk, their outlook, their children's play area in sight of home. Meanwhile, a parking ban for Henacre Road residents seems inevitable for coach access. The applicant is a fairly thick-skinned council using an FB application and focused on a grant, but not perhaps on a balance of empathy. Pave paradise and put up a parking lot.
Competition events, and it will also facilitate Bristol's travel behavioural change programme. Ongoing engagement with stakeholders will ensure we deliver a facility which is inclusive and accessible to all and benefit the city and wider region. The benefits of the scheme are clearly set out in the officer's report, one of which includes the improvements to the public rights of way and the national cycling network routes around the periphery of the site, which remain public. And I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Luke. I believe that is everybody who has put in a public forum statement. I don't see anybody else. And no, I'm afraid it hasn't been submitted beforehand. So, sorry, that's a process, I'm afraid. That's the process. Then over to Patrick for our presentation, I think. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Yep.
Yes, thank you.
So the proposal before members is for the open space to the north of King's Weston Avenue in Lawrence Weston to be redesigned and transformed into a Bristol regional cycling hub, which would include a closed-loop cycling track, a bikeability training track, a hub building with associated facilities. And just a quick overview of the context of the site. In the top left, the site is close, as you can see, to the intersection, the major intersection of the M5 and the M49. And as the red line plan shows the site with the just to the north of Kings Weston Avenue. Kings Weston Avenue.
Technical point, there's some kind of red dot in the middle of the screen. I don't know what's causing that.
That's my pointer, in case I want to point things out. Is that okay? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So as you can see, the site is largely open, is open space and is currently covered in soft vegetation with public rights-of-way transversing it. Also, just to point out sort of local facilities nearby, so there's the Lawrence Weston BMX track to the eastern side of the site, playing fields associated with the rugby club to the north, and also the Nova Primary School to the west, as you can see with the housing again in the south of the site. This is a policy designation map just to show you. The yellow represents the Avonmouth and Kings Weston levels sensitive landscape designation, for which the proposed car parking area falls within. The important open space designation is this green land here, which is the majority of the site under this application. And to the north is the SNCI running along the Barracks Lane Reen complex adjacent to the site. Here's a layout of the proposed cycle centre. So to the left, you've got the closed loop cycling circuit. In the centre of the site, the bikeability training area for educational purposes, a hub building here in the centre of the site also, with a plaza area for people to dwell in as they sort of prepare to go onto the tracks, and a car park to the east of the site, which would accommodate for approximately 75 vehicles. And the main access to the site, as has been noted, is Henacre Road here. You can also see that there'll be extensive retained and new vegetation around the periphery of the tracks and the site in general. These are some rendered images. They're just an indication of what is anticipated to be the hub building here in the foreground, with the bikeability track further in the foreground, and the plaza area with some shading areas and some tree planting as well. And then here's an aerial shot of the closed loop circuit. And around the periphery, there's a lot of retained vegetation. There's some new vegetation. Obviously, it won't look exactly like this. This is an indicative image. And you can see the rerouted national cycle route and public rights-of-way, which would also be improved in terms of their quality. In terms of response from residents, initial consultation occurred last year and it yielded 24 objections with 6 letters of support. Many different issues were raised. However, the main ones to come through initially were that this proposal doesn't just justify the loss of the South Bristol cycle facility. In planning terms, this is not a material matter and cannot be assessed under this application, so it's not assessed in further detail in this in the delegated report, committee report. Sorry. Another area of concern was the loss of unrestricted access to open green space for the use of nearby residents, the impact of transport and congestion on local residents. Revisions were received sort of partway through the assessment process, which increased the level of retained trees and proposed a modest level of additional trees to soften the landscape on site. Final revisions were also provided to introduce a path from the car park, a gated path to the BMX track, and to lower the level of the fences around the car park. A reconsultation exercise was undertaken in January and 32 objections were yielded. They largely reflected the concerns above and also focused on impact to ecology and local community access to the proposed site and facility, and a letter of support. I should also note that representations raising concern were received from the Bristol Tree Forum, the Shirehampton Planning Group, and the Lawrence Weston Planning Forum. So to just go over the key areas of concern from that were raised by consultees during the process of assessing the scheme. Urban design sought a softening of the site through optimised tree planting, minimising hard landscaping and a reduction of hard fencing around the site. More shaded areas were sought with opportunities to improve community access encouraged. There were modest amendments achieved in this regard, which were, I've just mentioned before, to improve the impact in this nature. In terms of arboriculture, robust justification for the loss of the tree group G20 was requested, which would be partially lost owing to the siting of the hub building. This was addressed by the applicant as there is a gas pipeline running to the north of the site, and so the hub building could not be built any further away from tree group G20. There's significant ecological value on the site, which would be impacted by proposals. Applicants seek to compensate for this through providing off-site gains nearby. The applicant has provided a baseline and calculated loss against which appropriate gains can be measured and secured. Transport and public rights of way teams have no objection to proposals subject to conditions, particularly regarding traffic management on event days where traffic would be anticipated to be greater. There's no objection from land contamination. However, geotechnical surveys reveal there is contamination on the site, and this would be remediated as part of proposals. It should also be noted that use of the open space as a cycling track is found to be compatible and ancillary with the existing site open space designations in policy. And so, to conclude, it is acknowledged by officers that there is a degree of impact posed by development in terms of public accessibility to the open space, but proposals don't conflict with the open space designation. Certain areas of tree removal remain of some concern, and also the level of fencing and hard surfaces remain an area of concern for our design department. However, this is weighed in the planning balance against the positive attributes of introducing a high-quality facility with a social and economic benefit for the city and wider region, as well as a demonstration that arboricultural, ecological and transport measures would be mitigated or managed as required. It should also be noted that the site in its current form is largely unmanaged and found to have significant contamination, whereas the repurposed site would feature an improved, enhanced, albeit diverted public right-of-way system around it, and contamination would be remediated. On balance, officers conclude the scheme represents an enhancement of the open space and thus brings this scheme to committee with a recommendation for approval.
Thank you, Patrick. Councillor, questions then? If you'd like to put your hand up in an orderly manner. Councillor Stone.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. I just wanted to quickly ask, how many jobs would this provide in the long term? That's my first question. And also, what's the cost of a family ticket?
I'd have to look at the case documents. They are available within the submitted case files for those elements. I don't actually have them written down before me. I think, yeah, one moment.
One moment. If we leave the case officer to look through the documents and come back with an answer, and I'll move on to others, Lisa, but I won't forget that you've asked those questions. Anybody else got some questions? Councillor Eddy.
Two questions, Patrick, prompted by the public forum. Mr. Ashton of the Tree Forum asked a very specific, or he said they were technical queries, points regarding the B&G, etc., and the set aside or not within the city boundaries. How can you respond to him and reassure members?
The applicant is proposing or is attempting to negotiate with our Parks Department to site the B&G off-site gains as close to the development as possible, and therefore achieve gains within the city itself, which would be beneficial. I noticed that the comment made by the Bristol Tree Forum sets out that that's not possible legislatively. I'm not entirely convinced of that. I was of the understanding from discussions with our ecologists that there might be the possibility for a register, a city register, which we can use, that is being developed currently. And the reason that there isn't a more formal off-site gains plan before determination, is that those discussions are ongoing, and if at all possible, we would definitely prefer to have those gains within the city, and they would be substantial. And there are some sensitive ecological sites very close to the development which could benefit from that. Worst case scenario, understood, but worst case scenario, the applicant is able to still achieve those gains through off-site unit purchase and meet the requirements. However, the first preference would be to secure those gains within the city if possible.
Thank you. My second query was put by Kim, who talked about the neighbour who lives near the access.
Tedder Street.
Looking at your residential amenity section, you don't flag up any proximity problems or noises?
So the application was supported by initial surveys in regard to light pollution and noise pollution, both during construction of the site and for post-construction management. The pollution control officer was consulted and raised no objection, but did want to see further information in that regard. During construction would be a construction environmental management plan, and post-construction would be detailed lighting plans. I think that the lighting impact assessments did note that there was a modest degree of impact to some proximal houses. So this needs to be managed out of the proposals if possible. As also with bats as well. So the lighting scheme, the detailed lighting scheme to be secured by condition would need to take into account neighbouring surrounding properties as well as bats essentially.
Public forum are not allowed to intervene in this part of the procedure.
And
Thank you.
If I can just continue just quickly, and likewise, a further noise impact assessment would be commissioned to ensure that, especially on events days, there would be no untoward impact on surrounding residents.
Thank you. B&G certainly can be delivered off-site, and there are areas within nearby. Obviously, as ward councillor, I'd be very happy to work with the our officers, biodiversity officer to all right. And now Jonathan is going to come back on Councillor Stone's question.
Thank you, Chair. It was just in response to the question around employment and the proposed employment associated with the use. Based on the information provided by the applicant, they are indicating that there'd be a total of 20 full-time equivalent employees associated with the proposal.
And the,
Thank you.
And the costs, well, I'll tell you the costs. For a family of 4, it's £24 to enter, £7 per adult and £5 per child. So I just want to make sure the committee understands that this is there's a paywall going up. And I wanted to make it very clear.
Okay, I wouldn't call it a paywall exactly, but appreciate there is a cost, as there is down with the current one at Angrove, yeah. Any further questions? Councillor Mugrabi.
I'd actually like to ask about the car park, about the car park, and if there's a plan in case it's overflows onto nearby streets. Thank you.
And so is that overflow onto streets, the potential for the car park to not have the right capacity, and therefore there be
Longcross particularly, as being that's
Yeah.
already a road that's got a few challenges.
Yeah. So the application was supported by a travel plan and a transport statement, which has set out details of managing, especially on event days. I think I think the transport, I should say, the transport officer offered no objection and concluded that the capacity provided would be acceptable, and furthermore recommended conditions for the scenario of event days whereby there might need to be further management of how traffic is handled. So that would be a pre-commencement condition before any commencement started, to ensure that the flow of traffic and on and off the site at busier periods was properly managed and would not impact on neighbouring residents.
Thanks. Councillor Stone?
Yeah, I just want to reflect on the design, because now we know that people are paying £24 for a family to go into this this complex. Why is there no camber on the actual design of the cycle track? Because usually there's a camber in cycle design. I was wondering that. That's my first question. And my second question is that at some point, will there be any concessions? So, for example, at life cycle, for adults, for lessons, for the local people to have concessions, to have free lessons, example?
Yeah, so this strikes on a larger point, I think. Can I answer the second one first? I'm not sure what you mean by the first one, but I'll... Okay, thanks. There will be concessions. I think that the operators of the facility will have the discretion to offer concessions to various groups where necessary. The need to secure the site so that it's safe for the well-being of the site users means that there will be limited access, obviously, for the general public should the proposal go forward. However, and the operators are not able to change that because of safety grounds and well-being grounds. And so the proposal is to develop a scheme of community events that allows the local community access at various times in the year. And it has been suggested this also be part of the public arts contribution, sort of themed days for the wider city as well. And that has been suggested as a post-decision condition to have a detailed strategy for how the community can have access, a schedule of access days for them, as you know, to ensure that they're not completely shut out from the development. In turn, I should also, it's not quite in line with your question, but the public rights of way around the site would actually be vastly improved and managed as well, including the cycle track, which I think is of public benefit too.
Can you just clarify? Can you just clarify about those concessions? Because I was a bit confused. So, will those concessions kick in straight away as soon as it's built? So, will those concessions be provided for local community groups like Life Cycle to provide community groups with free cycle sessions and lessons, and for local community and for local residents to actually access the event space under concessions? Would that happen immediately?
The concessions and the discretionary fee structure will be secured by condition. That is a post-planning matter. I believe the Cycle Centre in Bristol currently does have that scheme as well. That's anecdotal, but it is proposed within supporting documents for this application that there will be a discretionary fee structure for different groups of people.
Councillor Durston.
Thank you. I've just got a question around concerns that were raised about the exclusion of the BMX track and the sort of connection between the BMX track to the cycle centre. Could you talk to that a little bit, please? Thank you.
Absolutely. There was a lot of debate on this. Obviously, this has been discussed under pre-app processes for a number of years now, this scheme. And there's always been a desire to have, wherever possible, a level of public access and into sort of connectivity between neighbouring facilities. The issue with that, of course, is for the operators to run such a high-quality facility in an efficient and safe manner. They do have to have it secured, closed, outside of operating hours. And so what was negotiated quite last minute is a path from the car park to a gated path to the BMX track. So there would be a route, obviously open during operational hours.
Please don't shout out. It's not helpful. Carry on, Patrick.
Does that answer your question? Or?
Yeah, I think so. So are you saying basically if the BMX track was included in it, it would, currently it's public, it will remain publicly accessible, but if it was included in it, it wouldn't?
I think so, yes, exactly. The car park is an important part of the development and it needs to be secure. And the BMX track remains open, openly accessible. And so for the management and viability and function of the track, of the new track, there can be a connection, but it would be operational, it would only be during operational hours.
The Family Cycling Centre currently does a lot of work with school groups and vulnerable adults and children, and security is a necessary part of that. I noticed that the line on the planning document goes across the road which leads to the BMX track, so I think there is some concern that the current free access through the road to the BMX track would be cut. So in fact the BMX track wouldn't be funded from this, but access to it would be cut, if you see what I mean. It would be the worst of both worlds. That's kind of a detail on the ground, isn't it? But as long as I'm assured that we're not signing that off during this, I'd be content. Otherwise that would be quite a problem, because a lot of people do use the BMX track, and it wouldn't really be fair not to be putting any funds into that, but yet cutting it off. And I wasn't quite clear. Jane, can you see from there? Because the red line does go across that road, and some people had asked me about that, and I wasn't able quite to say, well, what?
If I could interject, there are a lot of conditions proposed by Transport for further details to the accesses to ensure the safe access and egress from the site, and I'm sure that will take into account the current route to the BMX track, if that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there is stuff, and I'm happy to continue discussion with those whoever is involved. Just wanted to make sure we weren't closing everything off for the comfort of local residents, that we weren't making a firm decision on something that is better clarified, not in the abstract, but on the ground. Thank you. Councillor Pulteney.
Hi, thank you. Just in terms of the loss of open space issue that's been raised in the public forum and in the report, it's quite clear that open space of public value could include things like green corridors. It can be visual amenity. It doesn't necessarily need to be open sort of public parkland. But in this context, I'm just wondering, given that the whole space will be now for private benefit, and it'll be enclosed, is that the extent to which we should assign it value when weighing the planning balance?
The way that this has been assessed, essentially, is the space is currently fully accessible. It's largely unmanaged at the moment. It does have these contamination issues. It does have public rights of way that traverse the site. Most of them are of low quality, and not. These would be vastly improved when they're rerouted around the site. The site would be an enhancement. The proposal would be a significant enhancement of the use of the open space beyond how it is used now, despite it being largely fenced off for security purposes, for safeguarding purposes, in its role for sort of health and recreation in the city, and sustainability and active transport. And I think that the recreational use, it doesn't result in a loss of open space. It's an enhancement. It's a different characterization to the open space that is being introduced. It's a quite complicated concept, but that's sort of what we've concluded after reviewing the MPPF as well as current design policies.
Thank you.
And just in respect to that, then, though, is there anything, apologies if I've missed something, is there anything from either the applicant or in respect to the CTRS bid that sort of elucidates or provides any evidence base for the benefits of what's being put there?
Sorry, CRSTS you're referring to?
The
That's
fund.
the funding stream from Department of Transport. It's not entirely relevant to, I mean, it can be taken up, obviously, but it's taken up in a different context from the planning permission.
Oh, sorry, I'm not concerned about that. It's that we're being asked to, obviously, this isn't the case where there's housing, right? So there's no obvious housing benefit. Yes, it's a private business, so there's an extent to which it could create jobs, I suppose, and we're weighing the creation of those jobs against that the loss of that public space.
It's a council business. It's the one that we've currently got. Yeah.
10 times, Chair.
Yeah.
Apologies. What I'm asking is, was there anything that put down in terms of the benefits that we should be weighing? For example, the loss of the public rights of way, the loss of the open space, the additional car parking spaces that we're putting there, all of the sort of negative aspects of the scheme. What are we weighing that against? Is there anything that evidences the economic benefits or the transport benefits of what's being put in?
In terms...
please, if you shout out, you're going to have to leave. Yep, really. Carry on.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the officer assessment of this issue, kind of the principle and the open space issue, key issue 1 basically summarises how this has been approached, and really just to really skip to the conclusion on this, in that benefits that have been identified are really with regard to health and well-being in terms of the function and the role of the facility. So as the case officer said, really, it's the enhancements that are resulting from the proposed development which officers consider would be the principal benefits. In relation to this issue, obviously the applicant has submitted additional material with their application as well. I was just looking at the design and access statement there in response to an earlier question just around the design, and what we have here is a really well-considered facility that has been really designed in collaboration with British Cycling. All of this, the economic benefits that result from the job creation as well, are all things that we weigh in the planning balance.
That clear, and I think Councillor Red Plowden sent a statement around to everybody as well from a transport perspective in terms of what the current work of the Family Cycling Centre does in opening up cycling to people with different abilities, etc., and also training children so that they're able to take up cycling confidently on the road in future. Continue that work that's proposed. Anybody else? Councillor Stone.
I'd just like to have a quick conversation about the co-design or the consultation with local people, because Bristol and Lawrence Weston have said that there's been a lack of local voices. Can you just explain how much integration or conversation have you had with local people on this application? And also, can you explain, but if nobody comes, this is a first of its kind. I don't think it's going to happen, but if nobody turns up, what would happen to the site then?
Well, I mean, in terms of procedure, for major applications, we require a statement of community involvement, and there's a detailed statement of community involvement within the case documents, which I'm trying to find my summary of. That is correct, that there is a degree of public consultation quite a while ago. That's because that's when the first sort of visions of the scheme were coming together and the pre-apps were coming in for initial discussions about the site. And another
Kim,
round.
Yeah, you're not sorry because you keep doing it, so please don't. I'm asking you respectfully, Kim, to allow councillors to ask questions and to think and discuss amongst themselves. It's part of the process. No, you can't ask any
And can
questions.
I just add that your constant heckling is really distracting? I think we're just trying to focus on what's going on.
Come on, Fabian. Let's turn over to Patrick speaking.
And so just to set out, the applicant has stated that letters were sent to, sorry, I'm reading off script here. An online survey was undertaken in February 2020 and carried out in 2022. A website consultation was undertaken in late 2024 to early 2025, with feedback received on all consultation exercises. So there were opportunities for the local community to be involved.
Did you have a conversation with Ambition Lawrence Weston? Did you actually sit down and have a conversation with them? It's meant to be co-design. Co-design is in the label. Co-design is where you talk to people, not just consult them.
Lisa, Patrick didn't because he's the case officer. He's not the applicant. Okay, but discussions were held with Ambition Lawrence Weston, yes. But it wouldn't be Patrick, and you shouldn't expect that of him. Patrick, do you wish to continue?
Just in relation to the statement of community involvement, which the case officers referred to, I'm just again having a look through it here, and it refers to a specific event that happened in March 2020 at the Lawrence Weston Youth Centre, and that was chaired by Ambition Lawrence Weston. The document also appears to set out a number of events and engagement things that have happened going back to 2019. So it appears there's been some quite extensive engagement on this.
Thank you. Any further questions? I would like to move to discussion, really. Councillor Poultney, please, quickly.
Did Bristol City Council bid for this? Is this something we asked for money for WECA for?
Well, it would be it's one of our proposals as part of the CRSTS range of things that we have asked for, yes.
When you say we?
Bristol City Council.
In 2019-ish?
No, the Transport Committee, it came through the Transport Committee recently. I think it's not the Levelling Up Fund. It's not the Levelling Up Fund. It came through. You can ask Councillor Plowden if it's obviously he's chair of the Transport Committee, but you'll need to ask him. But I seem to remember it came through the Transport Committee. Certainly, WECA wouldn't be giving Bristol City Council money that it didn't want. Wouldn't be offering to. Would it? That would be an unusual move. Thank you. Do we have, I think we'll move over to discussion now. Does anyone want to open up the discussion, please? Councillor Eddy, you were first.
In strict planning terms, I think this is a proposal which is worthy of support with the conditions attached. However, it does seem to me, we've all heard from the public forum and the report, there's a tension and fears with the surrounding community. So I'm sure we can rely upon you, Chairman, as Ward Councillor, to open a dialogue with the business and the community and to address their fears.
That's something I will do very diligently, I promise, if this is approved, certainly, as I normally do. Councillor Poultney, but thank you, Richard.
I'm sorry, Chair. We're weighing up all the negatives of a scheme like this against the positives. And it's in the wrong place, Chair. It's just in the wrong place. It might be worthwhile, it might be a good idea, but it's in the wrong place. If you're weighing up the benefits of what looks to be, I'm assuming it could be used as a racetrack or as other things, but what it essentially from the previs, it looks like what they've done is taken a road layout and recreated it in a space so that people can learn to cycle, but with the precondition they have to drive to get there. It's just in the wrong place. It might be worthwhile, but you could put it on brownfield where you're not talking about such a horrendous biodiversity issue.
This is a landfill site.
11 times.
A landfill site.
It didn't look like that from the pictures, Chair. It looked like a green space, and it's been assessed as an open space within the planning policy.
If you read the documents, it is a landfill site, and we have comments from the officers. Vicky, it's getting too much.
Apologies.
Well, you may feel passionate, but you're not entitled to engage in this discussion. No, I didn't say that. No, I didn't. Councillor Pulteney.
There's just too much at this spot. There's too much weighing against it. There's just too much weighing against it.
Fine.
The loss of the public rights of way, the loss of the open space, the biodiversity net loss. All of this will need to be compensated. And you end up in this position where you're looking at something, having to say, well, if you can fix all of these problems, then maybe it's a goer. And I appreciate when we refuse these things outright, then you end up with that problem that an inspector might come back and say, oh, you could have conditioned this, you could have conditioned that, could have conditioned the other. Well, let's test that a little bit. But not one person other than the applicant speaking here in favour, nothing really in front of us to evidence any social gain, any economic gain. There's a vague idea that there'll be 20 new jobs associated with it. And we're weighing that against the loss of a public open space that seems to be quite well valued by the local community. So I for one, will be saying no to that.
Fine, thank you. We've heard your opinion. Anybody else would like to comment? Councillor Eddy.
Very briefly, I just heard, we all heard Guy, and he's entitled to his opinions, but I feel like I'm in a time matter continuum when I hear Green councillors speak. There's always, it seems, an excuse for not doing something. We have to measure this particular planning application upon planning issues here. So, and it seems to be it's incontroversial in support of the application.
Yes, it's against, some people are against everything, aren't they? Any further comments from anyone? Councillor Stone.
Yeah, I would.
Let's count after Councillor Stone. This is a discussion, so we'll count.
It has to be brought up. I'm in agreement that it's not quite in the right place. It's look. You can have a brownfield site that was once upon a landfill. Thank you very much. A landfill, and it does recover really quickly. We know this. This is research that's been done over and over again. However, one of the main aims of this proposal is that we are going to encourage cycling, and we're going to hopefully make cycling safer and make people come out and cycle more. But to be honest with you, learning on a very safe environment does not help you cycle on the roads in Bristol. The roads in Bristol aren't very safe. They're quite dangerous. And we are trying our best to mitigate against that. And the only way that we can actually fulfill our obligations to safe spaces for people, for children, to cycle is to provide dedicated cycle lanes and to change the whole philosophy of cycling in the city. This single-use cycle hub is not going to do that. It simply isn't. All it's going to do is create a paywall of £24 to enter a space where you can cycle around and learn. Look, there are free cycling sessions you can get already. Okay, you can get them already. That's not the issue. You can do that in a space which is a lower social output area. It's in the wrong place. It discriminates against the local people, and it's meant to be providing more accessible accessible cycle transport for people, which it will not. So I will refuse this application.
We have spent years training children and young people in this kind of context at the Family Cycling Centre in Hengrove in order to give them confidence to be able to cycle safely on roads. That's been our methodology for many, many years. And you're saying that has absolutely no benefit at all.
It does benefit, but it's happened for many, many years free of charge in car parks by volunteers, by Cycle Life, by Life Cycle, by schools over many, many years, not for £24 per family.
Right, so let it continue in car parks then, is your view. Anybody else like to comment on that one? Councillor Durston.
Personally, I prefer my children not to learn to cycle in a car park. And I wonder where, if not here, then where is the right place? It's something that we hear a lot. Like, we're not against the idea, it's just in the wrong place. But in this case, I think actually voting for a cycling centre in an area that really needs facilities is the right thing to do.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to comment before we move on? Councillor Classic, it'd be nice to hear from you.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, there is a sort of irony here that everyone in our ward is angry that we're losing the cycling centre, and yet everyone is angry that it's moving. I would vote against this if I thought we could keep it in Hengrove and Whitchurch Park, because actually the cycling centre does a lot of good work, and I can see its benefit in the community. I hope that, you know, if this is approved, that there does become more work with the community to build those bridges and build those relationships. But having a safe place for children to be able to cycle, having a place where, you know, groups, where disability groups or, you know, adults and children can learn and that outreach can happen is a good thing in Bristol. And so I'll be supporting this application.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Pulteney, you had your hand up again.
It's been part of the quantum of the decision-making, Chair, is that it would be perfectly possible to build a cycle track on this space that was open to the public. You could go around the nature that's being lost. It seems to be the one bit of the city, with respect to Councillor Durston, that does already have a little bit of cycling learning infrastructure. Just to respond to the point that Councillor Eddy was making earlier, but respectfully, bending over backwards to make excuses to say no to things, we just unanimously voted through 520 bed spaces in a hotel. But the job of this committee is to scrutinise applications that come in. And that's what we're doing. It's in the wrong place. That's what we're saying. It's in the wrong place. There might be gains, but the gains don't outweigh the disbenefits. That's all we're saying.
Fine. And with reference to the paucity of a cycling infrastructure in my ward, I'm very happy to give you a tour at some point on my bike. You can bring a bike as well. Councillor Stone, I think I'll make this the last comment because some people feel that there is...
I'm not suggesting that it's in the wrong place. What I'm suggesting is that it's not open to the local residents in the community. It's not open to them. So I'm not suggesting that we go back and we learn in car parks. I mean, that you're taking words out of my mouth, yes.
No, I'm quoting your words, actually.
Yes, I know they were my words. But what I'm trying to say is... What I'm trying to say is that if we could revisit this whole vision and try and make the application so it's more accessible, more accessible for local residents to be able to actually do that safe cycling that we're asking for. It's just not accessible. It's £24 for a family to go and visit.
Well,
it's not accessible.
That will be a matter that I will be dealing with outside of the planning process. But I think there are some members here who are not satisfied with children learning to cycle in car parks and would like to vote on this now.
I'm sorry, but that's
so
outrageous.
Would anyone propose,
you can't say that I'm not satisfied with that. I'm satisfied with allowing people to safely learn to cycle, but it shouldn't cost them £24. That's what I'm trying to explain. This is not about safety on our streets for young people. If we want safe streets for cycling, then we have to provide safe streets, dedicated cycle roads, cycle links. We have to provide safe sessions, free safe sessions to learn, which we used to do and we still do, and we can continue to do. But here, all I'm suggesting is that we are charging people to use a facility. We are allowing people to come into our to drive to a facility, which is great, but it comes at a price, and it comes at a price for these local residents that will not benefit from this proposal because of the reasons that I've explicitly said.
Those things are not material to this planning application, and I personally will be engaging with them with extraordinary vigour over the next year or two. The officer's recommendation is for approval with the conditions as stated. Do I have someone who would like to propose that? Councillor Eddy, do I have a seconder? He's a proposer. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Durston. So I will now go around. Officer recommendation to approve. Councillor Eddy. For. Councillor McGraby.
Against.
Councillor McCowie.
Against.
Councillor Stone.
Against.
Councillor Portney.
Yeah, against.
Councillor Classic.
For.
Councillor Durston.
For.
Councillor Breckles.
For.
And myself, for. So we add that up.
5, 4, 4 against.
Carried. Thank you very much. And the date of the next application, the next meeting is? It will be at the bottom of the... The 22nd of April at 2 o'clock. My goodness, that's not very far ahead. Anyway, thank you for attending, everyone, and for those